So the #1 code in the country, P0420. A lot of problems with 420s, okay? One of the things when we're looking at a 420, we're going to go through, you could fix some 420s. And I'm not talking about replacing a cat all the time. We're going to give you some tidbits here. If you have any questions as I'm going through, please feel free to ask the question. And remind me to repeat it, because I noticed this morning, you know, Doc went up to someone and the person's asking them, I couldn't hear it in the back, and the people on the internet can't hear it. So just remind me to repeat it. It's something to do. So we'll go over components involved in 420. P0420, what causes this DTC? Tools to use. You're going to see certain tools that make your job a lot easier. And some case studies. Okay, now as we know, we have CO, HC, and NOx, the catalytic converter. Not to bore you with chemical stuff, but we know there's platinum, palladium, and rhodium in there. And how much in the substrate is a big difference. You know when the car has one this big, and you just bought the one from the parts store that's this big? It's not happening. It doesn't have the precious metals. There's no way in hell that that's actually going to work. You know, we have something different nowadays. Years back, if we were doing a dyno test, okay, or a tailpipe test, you could kind of get by throwing an aftermarket cat in, right? Now you know you have that light that comes on, and it's not only the mill light, it's the you suck light, right? The you suck light is the customer's going to come back and say, you suck, my light's back on, okay? So we have to alleviate the you suck light. Very, very important, right? So let's follow through and see what we got. First of all, I don't know how many of you know this, the right part. The California Air Resource Board, they're very particular when you buy a catalytic converter, and you should see this in your handout. You notice this is stamped? In California, if they have a worry, and this is going to happen, oh no, this is an extra, I'm sorry. It's not in your handout. I threw this in extra because I forgot to put it in prior to that. This number here goes on their inspection machine. They type it in, and they can see if this is a real certified OBD2 catalytic converter. There's a big difference. You've all seen stuff, and I'm not going to mention names because, you know, the arrows and the bullets are always coming at me. So I'm not going to tell you which ones suck and which ones are great. Well, I will tell you which ones are great. Factory ones are actually the best, right? But do you know a company like Walker, right? Because I've done this class for Napa as well, and they use Napa Walker stuff. They make a lot of OE catalytic converters. And there's a few other companies, but I'm going to use that as an example. Not every one, and if it is not certified, OBD2 certified, guess what? That's where you're going to have a problem. What's your problem cars that you have 420s on? Toyotas, Subarus, right? They'll start eating your lunch. This is not like a GM or maybe even a Ford that you can get by with it. When you're dealing with those cars, they're very finicky. Some parts stores are going to show you or sell you something with their lousy catalytic converter they're going to sell you just to keep the light off, and we'll talk about that. Okay? That's doing a wrong repair. If you want to really fix the car, you should look at it, and we'll show you some things to do and look at. Any questions on that? How many guys knew about this? A few guys. Good. Okay. 10 top causes. I'm not Dave Letterman, thank God. Although he did have those nice interns, didn't he? Oh, I don't know about that. Anyway, here we go. Ignition timing. When's the last time you even looked at ignition timing? Not with a timing light anymore, but we can look at stuff where? On our scan tool. And by the way, with the Vano systems or variable timing systems out there, you've seen Pierre last year talk about oil, right? Oil is critical because if the timing is off, you're never going to get this. And how about the guy that never adjusts the valves, okay, on his Honda or some other car that has adjustable valves? Is that going to cause a problem? That's going to cause ignition timing to be off as well as mechanical timing, right? So we need to be aware of that. Intake leaks. Well, if you have a Smoke Wizard or a Vacutech or a Snap-on or a Mac or whatever the favorite smoke machine is, you smoke these things. Ford Motor Company has a lot of problems where it only happens cold. You need to look at freeze frame. You know, a big problem is, how many guys in here have OE tools? Probably a lot. Okay. What do you really need to fix a 420 or any drivability type symptom? You need a generic global scan tool. You know why? OBD2 is going to give you freeze frame. You want to look at freeze frame. That Ford may have had an intake leak only when it's cold. But if you didn't look at the freeze frame to see the temperature was cold, you're jerking on this thing when it's hot, smoking it, you're going to be smoking air all day, right? It's not going to help. This is not the days of the bong when you smoked all day, right? And you had something happy at the end. Different day, okay? ECT, engine coolant temperature, okay? The temperature sensor itself could be out of calibration. You could have a voltage drop. You could have a problem. How many of you use stable in 22? SL5 or CE1. SL5 is CarQuest part number. CE1 is Napa. You should buy this. It's probably now about 80 bucks a bottle for an ounce. It works, okay? You should look in things like Troubleshooter or Pathfinder. You know what they tell you with that sensor, right? Unplug the wire to the ECT. Do you see 5 volts and minus 40 on most cars, right? Then you could check the wire and the logic of the computer. Then you run a jumper wire. This is a sensor circuit. We jump the wire. Do we see approximately 300 degrees and very little millivolts? Now, we can do this on any car. I don't care if it's a Mercedes. I don't care if it's a Rolls-Royce. I don't care if it's a Toyota or a GM or a Ford. Same crap, different day, correct? So you got to check the basics and make sure the stuff is good. Oil contamination. I call it my little, if you've got a big nose you don't really need, I can pull it out and smell it, right? But let's say you're not exactly sure. How about, now tasting, it's a little dangerous, Dave. A little not tasting. There's other things you taste and like, but not that, okay? You take the dipstick out and you do the burn test. Now don't go doing this in your shop and blow something up like Paul and come back and blame me, okay? What you need to do is take the dipstick into a safe area, put the lighter or a match underneath, and if this thing catches fire right away, dude, you got gas in there, and that's going to be a problem with contaminated oil, right? Maybe that's going to cause your 420. Injector problems. Well, maybe that even caused the oil problem, correct? Injectors that leak. Any of those vortex pieces of junk that are out there, right? Those popping valves are terrible. They're always dribbling, okay? It's just like Monday morning when the significant other is doing the laundry, right? They're going to see a bunch of drips, right? The same exact thing. Come on, I am in New York. You got to wake up a little bit, okay? You're going to see that this is going to cause problems and carbon buildup and rich conditions that are going to wind up killing a cat. Fuel pressure. Fuel pressure, the notorious Ford problem, right? The regulator 1 minute, it's perfect. Then all of a sudden, it goes, pyung, it pops to the top. I broke my snap-on gauge, and I made a mistake. I learned a lesson years back. When you're testing and you don't find the problem, do not take your test equipment off the vehicle yet. Why? Because stuff can happen. 1 minute things are running okay. All of a sudden, that regulator's stuck, and bingo. Did you have a question, Paul, or are you just waving hello?
I still want to go over 100 pounds.
Exactly. Well, Snap-on gave me a new gauge. I guess they hold up to their warranty, right? Okay, so fuel per air, fuel wide range sensor, or O2. Now, this happens to be a very big problem out there. The oxygen sensors that are out there are an issue, correct? You know, they have so many veins or slits. Someone puts the wrong one in, brand X, brand Y. I would highly recommend that you use the correct oxygen sensor. And not just change a part, test it. Can it actually see low? Can it see high? And how many of you guys have a sensor simulator to see if it makes a difference before you replace the part? You can get them on eBay now pretty cheap because people bought those things years back from OTC, didn't know how to damn use it, and a piece of junk collected dust, threw it on eBay for $100. Or if you have the Bernie Thompson 8-channel scope, he has a built-in sensor simulator. You could see if you change the voltage, does it make a difference? Does it work or doesn't it work? Remember, computers are just like our body. Sense, compare, and adjust, right? If I feel something hot, I'm going to pull away, right? I'm going to make that adjustment. So if that oxygen sensor is not seeing correctly, or the logic, you show it high voltage and the computer's not backing off on the injector, something got to be wrong, right? And don't be afraid to reboot a computer. Bill Gates, that must be his famous thing, to reboot that computer all the time, right? How many times has Windows screwed up on you, something don't work? Just happened on my computer the other day, Windows 7 Professional. He's gotten better, but every once in a while, you know something just don't work right? You reboot it and it comes back to life. When we're talking about a vehicle, sometimes you need to power the vehicle down and reboot it. Take the key out of the ignition, go to Radio Shack, buy a 1 ohm 10 watt resistor, make it up, take the 2 cables off the battery, put it between the positive and the negative, bring the capacitors down in that computer, stay on a few minutes or so, 5-10 minutes will be good, then retry it. In fact, we just had a car that my buddy here, Alex, did a great job, okay, on a Prius that had an issue. God bless you. The factory scan tool would not reset this computer. It looked like it did, you got to reboot it. You reboot it, bingo, came to life, car's done. Okay? So think about these things when you're working on them. You know, sometimes things get stuck. The logic's not right. Know how to check the logic. An air fuel wide range sensor, there are so many different specifications. They're not all Toyota or Honda with 3.3 volts, right? That's perfect on an air fuel. They're all over the place depending on the car. And the information is not that easy to actually find. Okay? So, Craig, you got a question? You got to wave because something up back there, it's pretty hard to say.
By correct sensor, do you mean OE or just a quality brand?
Well, I would stick to, if it's a problem car, I'd stick to OE. Okay? Not being Mr. Parts repairman or changer anymore. God bless you. Okay? Some of the aftermarket stuff, and you guys that work on these cars every day know a lot better. You know what quality part works. For argument's sake, Denso's a great brand, right? Bosch is a great brand, but if you put it in the wrong application, it's not the same. I'll give you an example. It's like the AC spark plug in a GM, but you want to put in the Spitfire, okay? Well, there you heard Doc this morning, you know, they're platinum or a rhodium. They got all of these crazy things on it, you know, that's going to give you a gazillion miles per gallon. Guess what? You know you're going to have an issue, right? I'd say, in my opinion, I would stick to OE. Number 3, exhaust leaks or damage. Are you guys looking at exhaust leaks? This is a common problem. Where do they leak on the Asian cars all the time? Right. They're all under the flex cover right there, right? You know, you have the flex pipe breaking, the manifold with all the covers on them. Notorious. Sometimes even threads from an oxygen sensor that someone put in, and they know when they took it out, they stripped some of them, right? And when they put it in, it's not exactly tight. So we need to look at it, smoke it. How many guys in here don't own a smoke machine? Don't. Oh, not bad. You guys are good smokers, I guess, right? Thank you so much. Cylinder misfire. Well, this is a biggie. Cylinder misfire, and by the way, we heard Jim, misfire does not mean ignition. It could, but it could be mechanical. I got a question for you. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. I'm not going to give you that question just yet. But misfire, we could have a mechanical problem. We could have a fuel problem. We could have an ignition problem. But misfire is big. Is that going to load the catalytic converter up? Hell yeah. And there it is. Number 1 problem, and you're going to see in a second. And again, this is not just a list that I pull out of my butt. You can find this stuff in ALLDATA or a factory information. It'll tell you that these are the big problems. You have to be aware of this. You need, like the tools in your box, you need to go down the list when you're diagnosing these cars. When I hear people can't do these, or cars that I did, and there's some case studies in here from Bernie Thompson, okay, it's the same thing. You go to a shop and sometimes people throw everything at the car. In my opinion, if you got a 420 and you threw a front and rear oxygen sensor, a catalytic converter in, you don't know what the hell you're doing. What's the chances of everything going unless this thing is really toasted? Okay? It'd have to be running bad for quite some time, right? The rear O2, if the cat goes, is that rear O2 going to be moving a lot? Is it going to get anything going to it? It's going to be pretty much, just hanging there doing practically nothing because the catalytic converter will clog up and won't work, okay? So you got to look at this stuff very, very carefully. Some of the things here that you can look at, I'm not going to go over, but here's just another thing, thanks to Napa, some of the things you can look at. When something's broken, oh yes, you do need a new catalytic converter. There's no doubt about that, right? But the problem is a lot of these cats come back to life. A lot of them. Now, nothing against my buddies there from BG, but when I first met Bruce from Run Right, Joe McFarlane used to work for Aspire. When I did some work for Aspire, we kind of knew each other, and he came up and said, you got to try this Run Right stuff. It's the Chevron Techron stuff. And I looked at the bottle, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. But I tried it, and it worked. And you're going to see, going through here, I successfully fixed a lot of cars by doing a cleaning. Not going to work on every car, okay? Then you can't have a broken substrate and say, oh, the cleaning's going to do it, okay? It may work with other cleaners as well, but you got to know what you're doing. You got to look at all the DTCs, pending DTCs, and most important, mode 6, to see if you're doing a cleaning. If my mode 6 doesn't improve, why did I charge this guy for 4 cleanings? Because I wanted to sell BG or Run Right? You got to see an improvement, correct? If we don't see an improvement, you got to stop. Because it's not going to work. You're missing something. Make sense? And always check the whole system. What caused the cat to die? Very, very important. So some of the common causes here that we just show you, the spiders about, pressure regulator a la Ford, some Volkswagen stuff. We talked about the burnt coils, the rainbow. Sometimes it may be a flashback to 69. We're not far from Woodstock here, right? But it's not those days of a flashback. This thing is burning up. That coil is an issue. He spoke about current rampant. I couldn't agree more. There's some case studies that I've done where up in Alaska, cars were failing emission test. The aftermarket coils they were using were bad. And I'm not talking they weren't firing. The current rampant, the amount of dwell time they had was affected, okay, because they were poorly made. And we won't get into what brand they were. So you got to be careful. Got to look at them. The boots. Now, on a lot of the European cars and Chrysler, there is no thing as a module. There's no such thing as a module on a lot of cars, right? And what happens when this boot gets beaten up? We know the consumer nowadays starts the car up, starts up and run, pedal to the metal. The computer's like having a bunch of us mechanics under the hood, constantly making adjustments so the car feels okay, right? And then what happens? This thing starts breaking down. They don't notice it, but the rubber or the ceramic type of insulators that go in the hole start breaking down, okay? Now, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. You're not the lucky person where when you go work on the car that you're automatically going to find it. You may brake rev it, you may throw it on a dyno, but how about taking the coil out and really stressing this out? That Hero or Hoagie or Wedge or whatever where you're from that you bought as aluminum foil? Take the damn aluminum foil, save it in your box like I do, and wrap it around that coil. And this also works for the deep well spark plug wires. If it's going to break down, you just gave it the best ground it had, right? You don't have to go there racing it up. Hey, Paul, look over here, Paul, right? Slam the hood on his head. No, you don't have to do any of that. You could see if it's a problem right away, okay? Electronic throttle, I do want to kind of mention electronic throttle. How many of you guys had problems either on Volkswagens or Nissans, probably the 2 big problem cars, right? Now, before you ever disconnect, as I said before, or you have an issue with electronic throttle, you should make sure your scan tool software has the capability of relearning and resetting these, right? You should also know sometimes when you follow the factory procedure, even with your scan tool, you don't seem to get the car to idle right. You sometimes have to fake it out and disconnect an injector or something, right? How many of you guys have tried that? Because if you don't get that idle down, it's never going to relearn, ever. Okay? So you got to know about some of these little tidbits of information. Any questions? Better off disconnecting it, okay.
Oh, and this computer one time we spent like half day to relearn that thing. Every second has to be perfect.
Oh yes, you want to use a stopwatch and actually watch the seconds. You can do a manual procedure, and I've walked quite a few people through on this with a manual procedure, no scan tool, to reset that, but you better not go 1001. You better look at a digital watch, and yes, you could get it. And again, pulling off an injector or something to make it happen, no problem. LaDuca.
When you said we should look at mode 6 to see if there's any improvements after each cleaning, what are we actually?
Okay, he's asking a question. When I said to look at mode 6, we're going to get into that in a little bit. Mode 6 gives you minimum, maximum, and the test value. You want to see if it had a value. I'll take a number, okay? The maximum is 10, the minimum is 1, that we have a 9, okay? And you may go, well, hold it, 9, that means it would pass because it's not 10. Don't worry about that just yet. If we do cleaning after cleaning and it doesn't move from 9, didn't go down to get better, your cleaning's not doing anything. And that alleviates you from sucking up the consumer's money and wasting your time, okay? At that point, how many of you have a video scope or a borescope? USA Tools is not in here. Sells the good ones. Here? Danny, you there? Oh, there you are. Okay. When you look inside, and I didn't embed any of my videos because of time, but when you look inside the catalytic converter with these scopes, take an O2 out, look in there, and if you see this thing clogged up, dude, it's probably not going to work if it's all melted in there. Like Volkswagens do, right? When they're toasty for a while, sorry, you're going to need a new catalytic converter. So look with a scope. You got to look on both sides. There's an example in here. One end is good. The other end was bad. So that's true. You got to just look very carefully. And oh, he brings up a good thing. One cat's good, but the one behind it's no good. And sometimes there's no oxygen sensor behind that second cat. And you want to just listen to that parts store, the red blue people or the yellow blue people, and you just want to stick in one catalytic converter, don't you?
No, it's going to damage, it's going to mess with the way the air flows through the exhaust. Is going to
Very good. You hear what he said? It is going to mess with how the air, the flow, the algorithm of what that oxygen sensor is looking at, it's going to mess with that, and you will not get that 420 to go away. Because we see a lot of people, you've all seen a catalytic converter, right? Then there's one with the oxygen sensor after, and you got another one, you go, well, the OBD2 is not checking that. It's not after that. Do you think they want to be nice guys, Nissan, and just throw in a free catalytic converter for the hell of it? I don't think so, right? They're not just going to do that. So you got to be careful. Look for leaks, this type of setup like Toyotas and stuff. Look under the gasket. Is the gasket good, right? Look at welds. Are there any weld cracks? Is the pipe cracked? Is there stress? Nissans and Ford pickups, right? With the exhaust manifolds that come off, they tend to crack quite a bit. You need to look at them. Again, you need to smoke it. Smoke the exhaust cold, smoke the exhaust hot. And by the way, you got to give it a few minutes for the smoke to come up. What I always like doing is stick the smoke machine in the tailpipe, and then if I can take an oxygen sensor or open an EGR or take one off or a pressure transducer, if I see the smoke coming out of the top, I'm good. Now that may take 5-10 minutes depending on the system, right? Because some of them have little weep holes. Some of them, it takes a while to get through the cat. Depends how big the system is and the volume you push it. But once you got smoke coming up to the front, then carefully examine the whole exhaust system. Does that make sense to everyone? Excellent. We do know load sensors, MAP, or mass airflow sensors can cause some major problems, right? Fix the known problems first before moving on. And don't forget, we could have a computer issue. When you see oil pouring out of it, or you see water coming out of it, well, guess what? I don't think it's going to be too good. How many in here have found either water or oil or tranny fluid in a PCM or a computer? And you remember we had a couple of articles in the TST newsletter about that. Okay. Here was a Toyota. You could see the smoke coming out. Okay. You got a manifold problem. Look at a crack on this one. Another setup. Little thin cracks under the covers. Those are the things to look for. So if you're not successful at diagnosing and fixing 420s, hopefully what we go through today helps you diagnose it and fix it better. Questions? Okay, some of the tools. Now, I even put a picture of up an old Fluke 98 lab scope. Okay? You need some sort of lab scope. Don't matter. I don't care what brand you have. Don't matter to me. A good scan tool. And again, all it has to be is generic, like that Code Reader 6. That's a great little tool that graphs and everything. Not expensive. So maybe you're on a tight budget. You can do that. Thermal imaging. This particular thermal imager does over 2,000 degrees. Okay. This is a little pricey right now at about $1,500 or $1,800. But 2,000 degrees, I can see if that catalytic converter is actually working. Okay. So that is pretty neat in itself. The Bernie scan tool, or the eScan, for drivability, again, it's a basic generic tool, and no, Bernie, don't pay me to say this. That's the tool I'm going to pull out, or I'll pull the OTC or one of them, but this is easy. It gives you nice colors, and when I'm doing a class, you'll see a lot of this. Why? It's easy to do. I hit print screen, and I'm done. Okay? Yes, Mr. Host.
Even with an infrared thermometer, you've got to see a difference of how many degrees on the cap.
You want to see if anything's going on in there from one side to the other. Yeah, a little bit different. We're not talking about a temperature gun. This is not the days of a temperature gun. This is a thermal imager. Thermal imaging is different, where you can see hot spots or cold spots. You may see nothing going on in the cat. May not be clogged, may not be cracked. The precious metals, the substrate, are just coated to death, and it won't work. So you can see if something's going on. The days of when BAR, Bureau of Automotive Repair, used to have the temperature gun, they tell you you'd have to check the front of the cat to the back. What happens on a lot of these cars? You may not be on the weld, and we talk about on the weld of the pipe, right? Isn't heat going to be different on something that's thicker than thinner, right? And how about if you have a shield on the pipe? BMW, Subaru, right? They don't put the shields on for shits and giggles, do they? The shield's on there for a reason. And now you're trying to go like this. Oh, I got the temperature gun through the hole. I don't think so. Okay? So you can't use that test. BAR no longer allows the temperature gun test. A good gas analyzer. Any brand is fine. In fact, one of our sponsors, EMS, I really like. Okay, you know why? They give you two probes, one for pre-cat, one for post-cat, and a little valve where I can shut it off. In fact, this is what John Thornton and those guys out there in Chicagoland, as we call it, they use his machine. And EMS is pretty neat because he's coming out in software now that I'll be beta testing for him, that is going to do pre and post cat, so you could see the difference. Is this catalytic converter really working? That's the key, right? Forget about everything else. And yes, I know OBD2 is looking for something. But if you see this cat is not 70, 80% efficient, you know you got a problem going on inside that catalytic converter, okay? So I don't know, how many of you guys have tried doing pre and post cat? If you're an old guy that worked on the European cars, we always had, right after the fuel distributors, you had right up front, you can set stuff up. I wish they still had that port. But we do have some ports. DPFE on a Ford, Toyota, back pressure sensor, Chrysler, Mitsubishi, whole bunch of companies with back pressure sensor. If not, both BG and Runright sell an EGR kit. You could take the EGR valve off, right? Put it down there and sample what's going on. You say the car don't have an EGR valve. Take the oxygen sensor out. Oh, hold on, you're saying you're out of fuel control. Do I give a rat's butt right now if I'm in fuel control? I'm going to leave the O2 sensor out unplugged, even if I take that out and see pre, post, right? I can leave it unplugged where no fuel is being controlled. It's going to go into a set mode. A predetermined amount of fuel is going to go in there. I can see if the cat is doing something before and after. Make sense? So these are some things that you can use a gas analyzer for. Also, if you really want to go for the money, when you use the smoke machine, if you put CO2 through it, Craig used to have a good customer who was in the paintball business. I guess she must have gave too much CO2 away to Craig. She's no longer in business. But you could flow a lot of CO2, and it's really not that expensive anyway, and you could pick up problems with your gas analyzer similar to what we would do on EVAP, correct? So if you got a good one like Bernie's or that EMS one, you got something that really picks something up good where you move it about like this, not, then you can pick it up. You got to move it about like this, and you start to get CO2. When you're smoking it through there, hey, you got a crack somewhere, or you got some sort of leakage. Okay? Comes real helpful up front. Now, we said mechanical was number one. One of the things that I'll do in a class, this was an old great lab scope, but we could have any lab scope. We can do this with a Pico. You could be Mike Webb with a Pico scope. Right, Webb? You love that scope now. Okay? Great scope. If you want to look back on some of the webcasts they've done, I've used the Pico scope. Okay? I have one. It's a good scope. You can use the Bernie scope. You can use an old LS2000 that probably got more dust on it than you can even think of, right? Pull it out. It ain't going to look pretty like this Fluke 98. The Fluke 98 comes up and it gives you bars. If the bars are more than 15% different, you're going to know you have a little bit of a problem going on somewhere, correct? The new Pico does that. Thank you, Mr. Webb. Software is free, but you need the scope. Very good. A plug for Pico. Okay? Very good. Very nice when it does a bar. Now, let's say you don't have one of those scopes. You see what I did here? These are just waveforms that are going up and down. When there's a problem, you're going to see a difference, and I don't know if I have it in this one, no. You're going to see a difference in these humps won't be as good. So you know what I'm saying? They're going to be further apart. They're going to be lower. What you're looking for is something uniform and even. Because hold on, if you don't check mechanical, this is Ford IDS. How many guys use the Ford IDS factory scan tool? Great tool, right? We got to wake some people up back here. Sleeping in my class. That's only me. Okay. Ford IDS is good, isn't it? You never know when to walk. I got a little gas after lunch, especially for you. Okay. Well, guess what? Why do you think Ford Motor Company, who's done the best job in this scan tool, why do you think they put this in their scan tool? They were replacing a bunch of parts. We know Ford is not the greatest mass airflow sensor people, right? So what do you think most technicians are going to do? They're on flat rate. They're going to throw parts at a car, aren't they? If I have a mechanical problem, what am I doing throwing parts at a car if it has a mechanical issue? Am I going to fix the vehicle? No. Okay. Now, if you're not aware of it, we could do this with Toyota. It's a little different, isn't it? So if you have the Toyota, you won the Mongoose cable, download the software, and what you're looking at, it's a little different. It kind of gives you the RPMs, and it's a little line. If something's wrong, you'll see that line change. It's not as pretty, but who cares? It still does it. Bernie's supposed to be working on his generic scan tool to throw something in. You won't know what cylinder it is like Ford or Toyota because they identify what engine and what VIN number it has, right? Well, Bernie's is a generic tool, okay? He would just identify from voltage going up and down, or when we put an amp clamp around one of these, right? We could do it in an amp clamp. Well, he would know from the diagnostic link connector, same thing they're doing, what cylinder has a deficiency, or one of the cylinders, I should say, have a deficiency. He won't be able to pinpoint which one. You would then have to pull a scope out and sync to number one ignition. Not number one fuel injector, right? Number one, ignition. Very important. Does everyone understand that? Any questions? How many guys in their diagnostic practice are checking relative compression that I'm showing you here or showed you here? How many guys are doing this? All right, the rest of you really need to start doing this. This is why you're probably having some issues in not clearing stuff up. Okay. I'm sorry? Data stream, if you have something like this where you have specific data stream for it, that's okay. If you don't have the Ford IDS or the Toyota Techstream, you're going to be needing to do something like this with any brand scope. This was just, I was doing a class one night. I showed the guys who put the blue filter. This was a popular scope years back, okay? And it's easy. All I did was connect to the battery positive, negative. I could have put an amp clamp, and I did the exact same thing here. The difference is, how do I get this on most scopes? Do I use DC? Do I use AC? Where do I couple my scope? AC, very important. So you couple your scope to AC, it's going to pick it up. If you have that amp clamp, the big current clamp, you put it around either cable, I don't care. Just make sure the humps are going up, not down, because you could have it switched, right? You're going to get the same reading. Just set it up for how you have the divisions on your amp clamp.
And then we go with this test cranking, not running.
This test is cranking with what? Fuel disabled. So you want to run it out of fuel. Pull the relay out, do whatever you got to do to kill that fuel. I'm sorry? Throttle doesn't work. Wide open throttle or clear flood does not work on every car.
No, just to get maximum air into the cylinders.
You could, but it's really not going to matter. If you got a mechanical problem, it's going to pull up.
I had hit an interrupter on a Ford police car. I couldn't, no matter how long I cranked that thing with the fuel interrupter broken, the thing still wanted to fire.
He had a fuel interrupter rig on a Ford. He was saying, in case you couldn't hear him, he said the car still wanted to fire. Then you're going to have to disconnect fuel altogether.
Well, that's right.
You got to drain it down and plug it. Yeah, sometimes you'll get cars that want to keep running because you're still getting something up there, so be careful. And we're aware that, again, clear flood, when you do this Ford test, or you do Toyota, this is in clear flood. How many guys have done this on the IDS? Tells you to hold your foot down, gives you the whole story, right? But not every car uses clear flood, so you need to know how to disconnect stuff. Someone had a question? Mr. Painter?
The next slide there, you're AC coupled on the...
Oh, the one back, you mean?
Yeah.
AC coupled on the scope, that's correct.
And you're just attached to the positive cable right there?
Yes, he's asking, am I AC coupled? Yes, I'm AC coupled on the scope. I got positive to positive battery, negative to negative. You can write that down on your handout. Very simple to do. That's a low filter. That's a 10-to-1 filter that keeps down. Whoa, now I can't hear anymore. That keeps down the noise. Okay. Also, you see, if you own an amp clamp, it's real easy. Then you don't have to worry about AC coupling, DC. You just got an amp clamp that you're going to throw it on DC, throw it around the battery cable, and you're done. Okay. By the way, how many guys had big box scopes? Don't worry, Mr. Todd. Don't try to trip me anymore, will you? How many guys had a big box scope years back? The Sun, the Bear, the Marquette, the Allens, right? You used to put all the wires on there and check this, right? And it used to tell you what was good or bad. Except for Allen. He was always lazy, left everything off. Lucky he didn't work for me. He fired. Jamie was right. He should have been fired. But anyway, when you put the amp clamp around it, this is just like the old days of the big box scope, right? There's nothing different. But what did we get away from? We got away from using the big box scope, and this is what Jim Morton kind of went over, why we kind of put this together, okay? You had to check ignition and stuff. You had to check your basics. But charging, very good. But what do people do now? Oh, I got a scan tool. Okay, your scan tool's pretty good, dude, but it's not going to do everything. That's when you need to pull out different artillery, right? You got to do stuff, right? Crank and vacuum. Vacuum's still important. The needle doing this. Hello, wake up. Okay? guess what? You know, when you throwing parts in the car, it's not going to help. When I see problem cars, when people bring them by or we're in a class and someone's doing something, it's always something stupid because the guy doesn't have a diagnostic game plan. It must be like those New England Patriots. They didn't have a plan against... Oh, did I say that, Fred? I'm sorry, Fred. I can't help it. My Massachusetts guys got to get you. Okay. No, we need a game plan, don't we? Right? You need to go out and know exactly what you're going to do. If you're sloppy and you don't have the game plan, guess what? You're not going to diagnose this car right. And then you're going to start just making another mistake. You know, one of the great things about TST, when Pierre and I sat down years back and kind of I envisioned this thing, is not only listen to me yakking or whatever instructor we have up here, it's networking with each other, right? I mean, that's why we also have that TST roundtable once a month. Hopefully more come on the network. Give us your feedback, your ideas. We learn off each other, right? No one knows everything. We learn off each other, and that is the key. When someone comes up here and says they know everything, they're throwing you a big BS story. It's impossible. I always use the thing, I have a G, right? I have a half an O. You ever get the other half an O and D, I'd be God. That ain't happening. It's the only guy that knows everything. No one knows everything, okay? And people, I've sat in a lot of different classes that, oh, I know, I've done enough of these. I know that perfectly. You're never too old to learn. And everyone, I learned this for years running my shops. Sometimes I'd get a new young kid come in. He'd find a better way to do something. An example here, I thought about this, you know, work on a couple hours sleep, you know, we're thinking about all these stupid prizes we had to give away. Go, oh my God, I asked for some, I got more than I wanted. Too many prizes, going to suck up a lot of time, right? We thought of something outside, input from other people, okay? That's what it's about, how to make this thing work better. And same when working on a car. Talk to people, that's why IATN, Identifix, right? Or calling your buddy down the road. Of course, more than one head is better than just yours. Paul, especially your head. Many days the head's no good. Last year you were out cold, so forget about it. Okay, so let's move on. Another nice thing. This is great, the power balance test. Not knowing anything about this tool, if I told you to look at that screen, could you tell me there's something different on this screen? Hey, where's my laser pointer? This screen right here, can you tell me there's something different there? Of course you can. The line going down is not even like the rest of it, correct? So we can see that we have some sort of issue. That's a problem. Don't worry. I need to get some exercise. I'm too fat. Got to walk around. Okay? So we see right away that we got a problem, and that problem is sticking right out at me. If I have the Ford IDS like it's up there, it tells me the exact cylinder. Okay? If it has a pressure transducer, and only if it has a pressure transducer on the fuel system, could I get the fuel balance type test. And this is important because remember we said it's not only ignition, okay? But if we have a problem, I can run this relative fuel injection flow test and see if there's a problem. If not, I may have to pull the injectors out. And how many of you guys own a flow bench? Okay, I do, but many of you don't. And by the way, Launch has a very good one for about a couple of grand that you can get in your shop now. Jim Lender, I don't know how much injectors Jim is doing anymore, okay? But I just had a couple of students call me up. They say it's real hard to get through to them. And they don't have a lot of stock there. So I'm not sure what's going on. But here, at least we could see and go, hey, there's the problem cylinder. Maybe I got to buy a new injector. You know, maybe I got to check that particular thing out. Maybe I'll current ramp that injector compared to another one, right? A known good versus a problem one. See if there's a difference. Make sense? Maybe the screen is clogged. How many of you taken an injector out and that little 1 to 2 micron screen is loaded with junk? Okay? That's a problem, right? And by the way, nothing against my buddy at Run Right or BG. You are not cleaning any of that debris out with any cleaner. When you got those things impacted in rust, I can't get it out with a pick, never mind cleaner. The cleaner is a maintenance program. You know, the things we do wrong in our end of the industry, the thing we do wrong is we're not like the quick lubes that sell what? Preventative maintenance. Okay? We do it after it's a problem. Oh, I'm afraid to sell my customer at $30,000 a fuel injection cleaner. I used BG in my shop for years. Okay? And I would sell the stuff. Why? It made me money and it made the car run good. I have an old boroscope, and some of you guys that were students of mine for years know, I used to have an old VCR deck that I would tape a camera on an old boroscope, black and white. I would do a video for customers to show them how much carbon was in there, and after I was done, I'd show them afterwards and how clean it would be and how different their car would run. And guess what? Once I gave them that videotape, I got multiple cars from that guy's family or relatives. They didn't want a tape. They wanted their car running good. But if you wait till there's a breakdown, it's like when you got a problem with your arteries and you wait till the last minute and the little balloon thing don't work. Well, they're going to be cutting your fat ass open, right? They're going to be doing some major surgery. It's too late. You needed the cleaning before, right? So you need to do it on a preventative maintenance. Helpful websites. We talked about Identifix, IATN, factory stuff. Go right to the website. Things, NASTF, that's Hyundai, Kia, everything. Google. By the way, Wall Street Journal. Who reads the Wall Street? Last week, a big article about fixing your car with the Wall Street Journal said Google is the way to go. I've been saying this for years. You know why? That IBMer, that frickin' guy knows more about his car because he's a nerd. He's going to read that book inside out than you, who are the professionals. Because he knows that car. He's going to go through every little thing. He's going to post something in Google that's better than I've seen sometimes on IATN or Identifix. And the problem we have in this industry, Identifix is great, and same with IATN. But how many guys go by, oh, it says to flip that, or take this out, or change something. You got to test, not guess, that old son saying. You got to really make sure, is that thing bad? Is that thing good? Not just throw another part in there. Throw another part in, that may not fix the car and you got egg on your face, correct? So we need to be aware of that. And of course, I get a plug where I make money from, my company, ATTS, Proper Training Help. So if you're interested in a hands-on class, I give myself a free plug. And of course, you're here at TST. Okay, Mode 6, you asked. Here you go. Now, according to Society of Automotive Engineers that developed this Mode 6 stuff for engineers, 0 would be perfect. But I'm going to tell you, playing with Mode 6, having written a few books on it, it really doesn't work like they say. And here's what I mean by that. Never mind the numbers. You got 3 numbers to be aware of. The test value is the test that the tool and the computer have done at that time. It's usually the vehicle's computer that did the test, recorded it, and your scan tool goes, give me some info. Now, the test limits, whether it be minimum and maximum or just the minimum or just the maximum, okay, that's the limits. That's the limits, okay? So in this case, and look at this, Joe, I have a test value of 0.016. This is what the computer spit out. The manufacturer tells me 0.00, okay, is the minimum. You can't go under that. Now you may go, well, how are you going to get under that? You could have that, or you could have a negative number. It's possible, excuse me. Maximum 0.86. Okay, 0.686. Now, some manufacturers, well, SAE said 1 should have been the maximum number. Every company plays it differently. Does that make sense? They're not all going to be the same. Now, looking at this number here, does that pass? Yeah. Why? It's in between minimum and it's in between maximum. Okay? Now let's look at the next example. 0.670. Does that pass? Borderline. Now, I'm going to give you a few tidbits that I've seen on Mode 6 that's kind of irritating. And in April, I'll be out at SAE in Detroit. and I sit down with the engineers, I speak to engineers, and if you ever want to come to Detroit, it's now in April, no longer in March. If you want to really see top stuff, what's coming out in the industry, listen to engineers. They're pretty boring, but they're smart as hell. You think, you know, they're like Bernie Thompson, concentrated and throw Neil in because they're engineers, right? Because you know my buddy Bernie, he's smart as hell, man, and some of the stuff he comes out with is mind-boggling, right? Okay, you go there and you say, well, hold it. Why would you make a standard that, you know, that's 0, and yet I can't get my monitor to run, or I'm failing, but that doesn't look like it's failing. Sometimes when it's too close to the minimum number, it won't let the monitor go, or it may fail. Same thing on the high end. And you go, what do you mean? That's really passing, it's just close. Some cars, yes, but not all cars. I've seen that. Now, if you get good at looking at mode 6, first thing you need to know, does your scan tool read mode 6 more than once? There's only 3 scan tools currently on the market that do. That Evo we're giving away, OTC, of course the Bernie tool, you know Bernie would want to have it update. And how many guys have the Bernie tool to see that it says run continuous, right? It's not a commercial for them. This stuff works. The other one is Ease. Stephen Galinsky from Ease was the first guy to actually do that. He queries the computer multiple times. All the rest of your scan tools just go, show me last data. So if something changed right now, you wouldn't know there was a change. Does that make sense? So what does that do to you? It puts you kind of bit in a little backward diagnostic position, doesn't it?
If you just back it up in the menu and reload it, will it give you the new data?
Sometimes, but not all the time, John. That's a good question. He asked, if I back out of mode 6 and I go back in, will it update? Maybe yes, maybe no. It's better if you run either OTC, where it says run continuous, Ease, run continuous, or the Bernie tool, run continuous. I never put Bernie's tool on, he has an option to run it once. What do I care about run it once? I want to know what's going on right now if it's going to retest or when I'm driving down the road or whatever. And you had a question. I'm sorry, Mike.
So would it have outdated data, basically?
It updates the data. You know, it's like looking at your PIDs, your parameter identification, right? What happens on a scan tool? If you're in an enhanced mode, you're in Ford or Toyota or GM, whatever, you got all of this data. You ever look at the data coming in? If you're on a computer screen, even if it's an OEM tool, you kind of see the screen flash and some of the stuff like light up as it's going down. It's going in an order. It's doing an update rate because it's requesting that. You know they don't look at all the time on most tools, including factory. Are they going to look at a switch like brake switch opened or closed constantly? It's not all that important, is it? They don't need to constantly query it. They may do it every 4th time they go through the list. Okay? They may do it every time, but they may not. It's the point I want to get across. So you need something that's going to query every time. Very, very important. Everyone okay with this mode 6 stuff? Oh, I got a couple of questions. The BO's coming out. Yes. And I'll get to you in a second.
If I'm looking at figures like that, I would condemn that cat. You know, I mean, in terms of those numbers are just too close to the min and max.
Okay. He said if he looked at this, and this is his opinion, he would condemn this cat. They're too close to the min and max. How many guys agree with him? Okay. Now, it may not be the cat. There's where I'm going to look and do the run right or the BG, right? I'm going to run it through, and I'm going to look for improvement. Now, some manufacturers, Joe, this would actually be not a problem. They may let it go through or pass. But how many of you guys are having even difficulty running monitors on cars? Are you looking at mode 6? Okay? There's no hocus pocus tools out there. There's a lot of BS with some tools that say they help monitors run. Ain't happening. The car runs the monitors. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. VAGCOM, you go to Rostech, how many guys are using his wiki on that Rostech site? I want you to go visit that site, and it has all this information with the blocks, all free, by the way. If you buy one of his Pro kits, okay, you get a year of even phone tech support. It is excellent. So again, go to the Ross Tech website. It's absolutely free. You don't have to buy their tool. And a lot of what Mike is telling you, absolutely true. And maybe you want to speak, there's a guy to network with. Okay, let's move along. There's just more information there. Here's an exploder. This one years back down in 1998. So a 420, a 301, and a 305. Now, obviously, what do you think is causing this 420? Misfires. Very good. The limit was 0.810. The test value pre-repair was 0.78. Post-repair, after they replaced the cat, was 0.080. Now, I ask you, if this was your mother's car, would have you sold this guy a catalytic converter? And by the way, we happened to be in this shop, and the guy who did this car didn't want to be bothered. He fixed the two-cylinder problems with the misfire, okay, and he sold the guy a cat. I'm asking you a question. Would you have sold this guy a cat? 0.010, okay, and he tested 0.780. What should have he done? If this is your car or your mom's car, you're on a tight budget.
Fix the misfire and retest it.
Fix the misfire, do a cleaning, retest it, right? Okay, but some people are not going to do that. They're going to throw a cat in for everything. Okay, this cop car came in with a 3.8 in it, 40,000 miles on it. After 9/11, you know, a lot of the cop cars, they run like there's no tomorrow at idle. In fact, GM had to do some new mapping programs for these cars. Because way too much idling, what happens? They tend to load up. So a 420 comes up, cat's bad. Here's the Bernie tool you're talking about, Norman. This is the test that he's doing the front O2 versus the rear. You see the red? That's the rear. Now, do you need the Bernie tool to do this? Answer is absolutely not. Do you have a graphing scan tool? I'll graph these two things. I can't tell you what the percentage is. I don't have a nice fancy-ass red box, right? But what I do have is the knowledge that the front O2 should go up and down, and the back should not mimic it going up and down. It should be steady. It could be low steady, it could be mid steady, it could be high steady, but it better be steady, right? We don't want to see fluctuations in that rear. Now, if you do this, brum, 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 of course you're going to see fluctuations. Does that make sense? We're talking at a steady pace. Bernie gives you a whole bunch of things right here. I have that cut off. Gives you a whole bunch of things how you race the car up. You're going to see some examples that even though Bernie puts certain things in there, I've had certain cars that maybe fail only at low RPM. Maybe fail only at high RPM. So you got to test all different ways. Okay, so Mode 6 agreed with this. This cat was a problem. Here on the Bernie tool, what does it say? Catalyst efficiency, 1.46. 1 was the max, right? This thing was toast. It was bad. Now, I didn't color that red. Bernie's tool and also Auto Ingenuity, they color it. How many got an Auto Ingenuity? It's a good tool, right? Colors the stuff, does very good on Mode 6 as well. Colors it up. Now, on this particular car, we looked at long-term fuel trim. Long-term is very important. This is why even generic, shouldn't we look at long-term and short-term fuel trim? I call it the predictor. It's basically telling you what's going on, right? So when we got a plus 17 fuel trim, okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to race this car up to 2,500 RPMs and look at short term and see if these numbers start dropping. If the numbers start moving, what's that going to tell you is the problem on the car? Got to be some sort of vacuum leak, right? Because if the fuel trim numbers are high at idle and we come off idle and it changes, hello, right? It's an idle issue. Once we're off idle, vacuum doesn't matter as far as the vacuum. So here we noticed we did that. Some of the problems on these cars. Now, first of all, I think this morning we talked about PCVs. Now, I got a good question for you. This is one I always like throwing in a class. The PCV valve on this, General Motors did not trust just their mass airflow sensors, right? What did they back up? They backed it up with a MAP sensor. But they also did this for another reason. EPA wanted something called a PCV monitor, didn't they? Have you seen a PCV monitor on a car? It's usually in CCM, Comprehensive Component Monitor. Okay, it's not its own monitor. Now, what this is doing, if I have a vacuum problem, my PCV valve is under here, isn't it? You get the wrong PCV valve, you got a problem. Quickly hooking up with scan data on a good running motor with approximately 18 inches of vacuum at idle, where should my MAP voltage be? About 1. If you don't know that, you need to write it down. Okay? 1, 1, 2. Once you start going up like some of these cars they had, because they were buying the company's defunct, so I'll mention them, Chem PCV valves. Okay? They bought any junk, the calibration. Forget about shake and bake, right? We're not shaking them and baking these things. The spring, the calibration, the orifice is the important part. If we have too much of a vacuum leak, right, we're going to change what the MAP sensor reads. The MAP is going to change fuel delivery, isn't it? What else goes bad on these? These manifolds, right, and the other under manifold. The hose that goes to the power booster on the side. When you got a vacuum leak, you got to fix it, right? Everyone understand that? So we can check it out and always look. Now, here's one that I always like to say. We need to do our game plan, right? You need Mitchell, you need all data, you need Identifix, you need IATN, you need access to factory stuff. You know why? You never could have enough information. And you better have a systematical approach in what you're going to do. Now, what do I mean by that? If you threw a new catalytic converter in this Nissan Frontier, you would look like a real moron. You know why? There's a TSB on this. What does the TSB say? Okay? ECM reprogramming. There's tons of cars out there. Hondas do that and stuff. Toyota does that. If you're not looking at that and you threw a new catalytic converter in the car, even if you bought the dealer one, maybe it didn't work, right? And it keeps throwing the code, and a guy goes back to the dealer or to a shop that does reprogramming, and they look at the TSB and go, oh, you need to have your car reprogrammed. What's the first thing the customer's going to think? He didn't need that catalytic converter. You ripped his pants, didn't you? And maybe you did and maybe you didn't. Maybe you really did need it besides that. Because I'll show you my accountant's car in a little bit, and I'll tell you what happened there. So you need to look at everything. If you're not doing this in your shop, if you don't have a diagnostic game plan, you know, if there wasn't a couple of ladies in the room, I'd tell you, like when you go to the bathroom, you need to do the same thing, right? You start changing what you do, you're going to have problems. This is the issue when you're working on a car. You need to do the same thing methodically every time. That's the way to diagnose it and fix problems. Okay, here's a Subaru with a P0301, and then it got a P0420. So we know it kind of loaded up, right? The front air-fuel ratio sensor can be tested using a scan tool or a DVOM. The spec on this car is 3.47 volts. The rear sensor, we know no one as of yet that I know of is using anything but a regular oxygen sensor. So the rear O2 can be tested using a scan tool, a DVOM, or a scope. The reading should be close to steady in the back, we said. Check fuel trim. But what caused the misfire? Plugs, fuel, ignition? Do you know where to go on this car? You need that game plan, right? We should be looking at everything. We should be looking at TSBs. We should be looking at mode 6. You know, freeze frame. Why work hard, right? Why rack your brains and do something that is a very hard test to do, something that the customer doesn't want to pay you for? Get this data, print it out, you should be printing by now, and use something simple. We look at fuel trim numbers. Now this is another plus of having this particular scan tool. You look at stuff at idle, this is RPM, this right here is throttle position. So we got a little something going on here. We can see we got one DTC right now. We got some green boxes, okay? At idle, okay, highly negative fuel trims, okay, you could have a MAF that's dirty, okay, you all got MAF cleaners. You should have that CRC stuff, works pretty good. You could have leaky injectors. This would give you a negative reading, right? The computer should compensate for these problems. You could have the fuel pressure regulator problem, right? We went over that. You could have an EVAP purge stuck open with the soaked canister. Now, if you don't have a soaked canister and the EVAP purge is stuck open, it's not going to go negative for too long. Why? It's going to do the suck out, and it's not going to be a constant stream. So you want to look for a soaked canister. The CTS out of calibration, so the temperature sensor, wrong spark plugs that are too cool. And by the way, a lot of these people go to the AutoZones, the whatever stores, and they're going to pick up spark plugs and throw them in themselves. Make sure they're the right ones. Also, make sure that some of these people may put, even shops, too much anti-seize on a plug, right? Too much anti-seize, Ford has a TSB on that, it'll cause a misfire. Why? Because you're not getting a good ground. Does that make sense? So be careful on that as well. And map sensor out of calibration, thinking that the manifold vacuum is high. How does that happen sometimes? Well, you remember some of the water in hoses, right? Gas in map sensor hoses. Got to look for these things, okay? Now, fuel trim explained on a highly positive number. Vacuum leak, but only at idle, right? Because once I go off idle, does the vacuum leak matter? No. Stuck open EGR. By the way, if it has an electronic EGR, what do you want to look at on your scan tool? Position. Very good. Position at idle, gentlemen, should be what? Zero. Correct. Zero at idle. Excuse me. Fuel pump leak. Some of the porous hoses on the vehicles, right? You know the screw clamps, everyone likes screwing stuff. They screw it, when you see the rubber starting to come through the screw clamps, dude, I think you over tighten it. That's why they have some of the plastic ones and the crimpers. Also, there's a TSB from Jeep. Jeep had an issue with hose that was porous. It wasn't a good quality fuel hose. One of the things to look for, not only on Jeep, but cars, extended crank. When you crank this thing, it goes, boom, finally goes. Here's the thing to do. Shut the key off, do the 2-second wah, pump comes on, shut it off, another wah, do the wah about 3-4 times. After the 4th time, if you turn the key and now starts up, you got a leak down problem. Could be the hose, could be the guy that over-tightened something. Well, the regulator leaking back, could be. Okay, could be leaky injectors. Okay, but these are some of the little tricks that you can look for, correct? Exhaust leaks. We told you how to check those before. Misfire with hot spark plugs. Clogged or non-functioning injectors, right? If it's lean. And by the way, a lot of injectors are dirty. You know why? We didn't sell the maintenance. You know, sometimes I do things with Run Right and we'll go to, I don't know, there's shows with Midas, for argument's sake, okay? These guys are looking to make money. They're not ripping anyone off. The Midas franchisees or the company, they're looking to make the most buck out of their store. They believe in preventative maintenance. You all feel too guilty to tell the guy to do something preventative. Oh, he can't afford it. Never assume or presume something, okay? You don't know what the guy could afford or not. You could tell him in the long run, do you want to spend big money down the road on a catalytic converter or some other part, or do you want to do a regular maintenance program? Let's face it, you know, when you get a lot of stores, years back there'd be a lot of tune-up shops, right? And sometimes these tune-up shops would replace every part. You know why they replace every part? The chances of something going bad when everything is new is a lot less than old stuff in there, right? So same thing if you do preventative stuff like cleanings, throttle cleanings, just be careful with electronic throttle, right? We don't want to go in there and go spraying up a storm, you'll have an issue, okay? But if you do preventative stuff, that car, or that vehicle, I should say, is going to give you some trouble-free driving. Next thing here, the EVAP purge stuck open with an empty charcoal canister. So just sucking, right? If you got, like, it's like a vacuum leak. And those purge valves, do they stick? You bet. By the way, when they stick, what do you look for? That's right, a piece of charcoal stuck in the solenoid. It can't close all the way. What do you need to do besides change the solenoid?
Clean that line.
Clean that line and change that canister. Because you know what's going to happen? Put a new one in, going to come right back and get you. Air injection. You don't have too many air injection problems, although on Volkswagens, when the hose breaks, right, you sometimes get the air constantly going on because the broken vacuum line is there, right? So if air is constantly blowing upstream, it's going to think it's lean, going to cause a rich number, correct? And map out of calibration. Okay, more stuff here on conditions, pirated air. Any condition highly positive, mass airflow defective, major fuel deliveries, O2 shifted lead, exhaust leaks, timing decrease engine, timing problem, decrease engine vacuum, low fuel pressure or volume. Any condition, highly negative fuel trims, defective O2, so you shift rich. Always check the O2 sensor, okay, or air fuel. Is it working as designed, right? You know, the old test, we used to have the spit test just on an O2 sensor. If you touch the battery with a wet hand, you touch the wire, you back probe it, do you see the results inside on your scan tool, excuse me? Do you see a difference, okay? And vice versa if you went to the negative or positive side of the battery. Is it working? Is it causing a change? High fuel pressure. Okay, a 302, that's a misfire. Okay, I'm going to go after that. So right here, here's some good information on this 420. One of the things, calculated load. This is just generic OBD2. Very important to look at calculated load, what was in freeze frame and what you actually have at idle. Why? At idle, maybe it is 17%. What does this mean? The guy probably let off the throttle, right? Because sometimes this freeze frame information is not the most accurate. You know, here it's in centigrade, so you can do a 1.9 or so factor ratio. Fuel trims, are they pretty good looking long term? Minus 2.34. Nothing super bad, right? And short term's bouncing around. MAP, intake, these are the things to look at as you're going through. Now, what fixed this vehicle here was new plugs, a tune-up, and a catalytic converter. You see these extenders? This is what some of the parts companies, when they sell you crappy stuff, tell you to put in, okay? And by the way, this is no horseshit. Excuse the language. You will get a $30,000 fine if they catch you. Not 10 anymore. Now they're up to 30. And when it comes to any EPA regulations, they go through corporations or whatever. They'll get the money out of you. So you don't want to be caught doing this stuff. There's a guy on the internet. When I seen this, I contacted EPA. Okay? I know the people at EPA, and I said to Arvin, I said, how the hell could these guys still sell this? There's a place on the internet, $45, and all this is a spark plug extender. Oh, he made a little screen on the end of it. I'm like, boy, I'm in the wrong business. He's selling these things for $45 a pop, probably can't keep them on his shelf, and yet nothing happens to him. Well, EPA told me to pass this along. EPA only makes the rules. They are not the enforcement group. Okay? Now, you see, in New York State here, we do have some DEC people that come around, or we have, some of you may have seen some of the white cars with the green sticker. They look like state police because they really are a state trooper. just on the EPA side, they can come and give you this big fine. They could do a sting operation on you. You don't want to do this. You want to fix the car right. Does that make sense? Fix the vehicle right. Well, I haven't seen that, but I'm sure that's right. He says dirty jobs, that show on TV. The guy's releasing refrigerant in the air. Well, some of you guys, how many guys have sold cars to be crushed? Well, just recently a guy came to pick a car up, so we figured he could strip the car, take the gas out, take the refrigerant out. Nah, they just crushed the whole thing. They're just out for the money. So what happens to all of that stuff they're worried about pollution? I guess when no one's looking, it don't matter. It's the only thing I can think of.
I can tell you that the paperwork matters and they worry about that, but they absolutely don't worry about that.
Well, you haven't been down the Bronx yet, have you?
They do cut the fuel tanks out, though.
Sometimes the little red stuff comes out too, which is really bad. That's a can of red paint, of course. Okay, this case study by Bernie Thompson in 2004 in Pala here. Customer complaint. Right away, customer complaint. It's pretty important, right? Low power. What's coming into your head? Low power, low fuel mileage. Very good. So sometimes we can use things to diagnose. Fuel trim, nothing crazy. The numbers, I don't really see anything super bad. Oh, you're the man. Thank you. Okay, I don't see something super crazy. I mean, I'm not a big fan of when I go over 10. Okay, those are fuel trim, add fuel or whatever. But remember, you can't get 5 pounds of duty out of a 1 pound bag, right? Back pressure testing is important. Now, I do have a question for you, because most of you people own back pressure gauges, right? What is good back pressure at idle? Okay, I heard 1 to 2 pounds. How many people agree just with that statement? I want to see hands. 1 to 2 pounds. You bet less. Most cars have what I heard, 0 at idle. How about when you race it up to 2,500 RPMs? Yeah, very little, right? If the system is working good, you're not going to have a problem. Some cars, try this on a 4-banger. Get a set of welding gloves and a couple of rags. And the guy in the shop you don't like, tell him to go plug the pipe a little bit. Watch fuel trim. Watch what's happening if it's a MAP sensor or a mass air, right? Because something called volumetric efficiency, right? We got to be able to get air in and get it out. Makes a big difference, right? Well, you do that on a good running car. 4 cylinders are easy to do. 8 cylinders are a little tough. But you could actually learn from that by plugging a good sealed exhaust system up and watching scan data and what to look for. That way, you know when a system's starting to clog up what you need to look for. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, look at this car at idle. Now, Bernie did this one, not me. What does Bernie tell you here? Make sure these are all green. Make sure you do about, 1,800? He's failing miserably. Look at the reading. The catalyst efficiency is 8. 8, okay? Look at his volumetric efficiency. Remember what I said? Clog the tailpipe up? The red line in the back, and this is another good point of this tool. Are we getting enough air in? Okay, are we getting enough air in? And this thing tells us quick for the mass air. We could do 90% of load. Look at the load PID, right? Because if you don't have this, that's what you want to do is graph the load PID. Calculated load, you may want to write that down. Calculated load on your scan tool, generic or global. You want to graph it and look at least having 90% of calculated load. This is when you're going down the road and you pedal to metal. Okay? And I'm not paying your speeding ticket. You got to worry about that yourself, okay? So here, Bernie's tool says, well, volumetric efficiency is pretty bad. Wouldn't we expect this if we took a good car and I clogged the exhaust up? These guys up here from Massachusetts, they play. And I'm not saying they play with each other. They play on cars once a week. By the way, the Chicago mob out there, Thornton Manor and our friend Ken Sanders will be out in June. They do the same thing. They get together because what do? You experiment and learn, right? So these guys up here, Bob and Mark, I almost forgot your name, you know, and this guy here, Mr. Technician, I don't know, maybe ATS is his name, Rick, and of course with Dave here, you know, they put stuff together, and sometimes I think you even have a couple other guys help you, right? They come up with stuff, and this is sometimes even what I do in a class. Of course, guys learn by seeing what happens to something good. You clog up a good car, right? A good running four-banger, if we pop a potato in there, and we got to seal that exhaust system up, what's going to happen? Are you going to have volumetric efficiency? Obviously not.
Just slam a half-inch socket in the tailpipe.
That works real good because you have the little hole. Half-inch socket in the tailpipe. Hey, hold it. I'm not telling you what I'm driving.
These guys are rental cars, realize that.
Huh?
We clog them up with their rental cars.
Dave goes, rental cars. Yes, we know the rental car trick. Now, look at the difference between a clog cat. Now, we talked before about the video scope or borescope going down. You go down and start looking, not only look at one end, look at the other end, but look at that substrate. Is that clogged to death? Okay? And a lot of times you'll see them in an example coming up in a little bit. You'll see things that are a lot worse. Okay, here's a 2002 Volkswagen Jetta. I see Mike Webb getting ooh, ooh, ooh already. Okay, he'll turn into, was that Horseshack? Okay, a bunch of codes. A 420, an oxygen sensor, P0220, a random misfire, a 302, a 304, a bunch of stuff. Had a bad ECT, okay? Otherwise, the vehicle ran fine. Had an intermittent DTC, not found on OBD2, okay? Fuel trim was good. But look at this. This is a video scope picture that we took. We went in. Look how clogged all this is. Can you see this? Where's my little blow-up doll? Amazing when you go in and look. Are you going to save this cat? This probably happened over a big, long period of time, okay? And if you look at this, there's also TSBs on it, right? You need to look at some of these things. Because if you don't look at that TSB and see what they're saying about it, you're going to run into problem. TSB says the catalytic converter can be tested by trying to set the monitor when running, and it's not rattling. Well, we know if the rattling's bad. Seeing is believing, even at low mileage, the cat was obviously degraded. Simply remove an O2 sensor, just what we did here, and all you had was that little part that you could really see through. You put smoke through this, and you'll see just a small amount will get out. Sometimes, with the smoke machines, they're not high pressure, right? If you have your pressure cranked down low, you're going to see it's real tough to get anything through these things. So be careful when you're dealing with this. Here's a Toyota. This P0420 on this Toyota. This guy owned a repair shop, a Sunoco station. He's no longer in business. Nice guy, Sal. He did nothing to this car. Absolutely nothing for years. You know, big mileage on it. The technician who originally looked at this car, okay, if you have Bernie's tool, Bernie's pretty finicky when he has mode 6 stuff here for Toyotas. If you got his tool, you know what I'm talking about. There's a whole bunch of drop-down menus to pick the right information, right? Because that right information is going to change stuff. You look here, we got a maximum limit of 0.998. We got a test value of 10.37. Obviously, that's why it failed, right? Bank 1 oxygen storage, okay? Oxygen storage capacity. ECT's getting pretty close to a problem, right? In yellow. The technician here, when he saw the oxygen storage, threw an oxygen sensor in the car. Didn't read carefully, and this is not BS. Didn't read carefully. What's this oxygen storage kind of telling you? It says right here, catalyst. He didn't read that part, he read that part. Okay. And you notice I highlighted both of them and gave you this information you had there. Generic, believe it or not, when he had the scan tool hooked up, we went into generic mode. Didn't fail. Didn't fail. Don't know why it didn't fail, but nothing came up, just like that. Maybe for some reason on that car, it should have come, even though it says description unavailable, shouldn't I have gotten something? I did get the yellow down here. That must be what? What was wrong on the previous slide? The coolant temp. But I don't see anything up top. Excuse me. Now, the limit's still 998. Catalyst deterioration, 1.037. And there we have the Toyota with the right information for that particular car. So when you look on some of the scan tools, when Bob Pattengale, who now works for Bosch, and by the way was kind enough to get us some of those donations from Bosch, okay, Bob did a lot of Bernie stuff. He went and looked at Toyota very carefully to make sure he had all the right engine codes, because sometimes when you go into mode 6 on certain scan tools, when they're not requesting the proper information, guess what? You don't get the proper results. Now that guy, if he would have read a little more, even though it wasn't that accurate, he's looking here. He wasn't looking in that other column. He should have known that oxygen storage was catalyst, right? Okay. So he goes changing a whole bunch of stuff. Here's what fixed this car. Run right. Now, he did need a tune-up. His plugs had, I should have the pictures of the electrodes. Practically gone. 120, 130,000. Air filter, original. This was a Toyota. He had the Sunoco. When you come up to my place, Paul, you know where the golf driving range is? That was his shop. He believed doing nothing in the car, ran good, wasn't going to put a penny in it. When it ran bad. Now, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to tell you the truth. Remember we talked about before looking at mode 6? This wasn't a magic bullet of just one cleaning. This took 6 cleanings, and probably over the course of, I don't know, maybe a month and a half, okay? Because every time he came back, I wanted to see if this thing was improving or not. And it kept getting better and better. Then we put some of the sledgehammer stuff in the gas tank, ride around. Well, one day it tested, it blew those results of being 0. It blew good. Okay, now that doesn't mean even a new car, you may sometimes get a 0. That's just at that particular time. But guess what? His 420 was then gone. It didn't come back. Okay, so cleaning sometimes works. What did he do? He did no preventative maintenance that screwed the pooch on. It's called original fuel filter. Everything was original. And you see a lot of people out there. The economy's pretty tough, right?
Ain't broke, don't fix it.
Ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it's a lease, you know they ain't doing squat on it, right? And this guy, he was going to get rid of the car. Here's my accountant's car. Alan one day was going to stop by on a Saturday. He said, I'm going to be a little late. Nothing new from my accountant. He's always late. Okay. So I said, well, how late are you going to be? He goes, I got to go down to a dealer down in White Plains. Okay. His light was coming on. Now, the dealer at Infiniti was clearing the light out, and he did this probably over the course of maybe a year or better. Told him the light coming on was normal. And you probably, by the way, when I do OBD2 programs in different areas, how many times, in an area that never had OBD2, and it's brand new, like upstate New York, Buffalo, let's say, right? When they had no emission testing whatsoever, okay? Or even here, Dutchess County, had no emission testing for years, okay? Guess what? When people had a light on, what would a lot of guys do? Driveway diagnostics, right? They want to be the hero. Go out with the scan tool, clear the code. Hey, you're good. You know, I'm just your buddy, right? Customer don't care. And sometimes they would even be told by the dealerships or aftermarket technicians, that light, don't worry about that light. Right?
Classic answer was a glitch in your computer.
A glitch in your computer. Exactly. You've all heard this, right? They all do that. Okay? So people get used to this stuff, and he was used to it. I said, you crazy? That shouldn't happen. You know, he had about 70-something thousand on his car. Now, at this time, this is a few years back, I took the Genesis real quick, I popped it out, and I went through Mode 6 results. Mode 6 at that point on the Genesis did not decode the info. Now, what I mean not decode the info, test ID 02, component 01, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. Do you? Not a clue. Not a clue at all. But I do know it failed. So when it fails, oh, there's the big screen I can see again.
Yeah, but some of those, so just, I was going to mention that earlier, some of these aftermarket scan tools, my customers run into, I do it all the time, it says failed, and that's default values, and they start throwing parts in.
Okay.
And with this, because this is not...
What Dave is saying, some aftermarket scan tools sometimes come up with default value as failed, or if the component's not installed in a car, it says failed. That's the most common one. But you'll see where I'm going with this. Good one there, Dave. Remember this 02 and 01. Now, I went on the Nissan website because they're the Infiniti people, right? Now, back then, I was doing stuff. I headed the training committee for NASTF, the National Automotive Task Force. So I had access to a lot of stuff for free. That means I reviewed websites, I reviewed all, but I paid. Because you know why? The accountant was paying. I wasn't going to pay for it, give it to him for free. Charges me, it was going to charge him for information. They took my 20 bucks, and I wrote a complaint up. They took my 20 bucks on a Saturday. I didn't get the information, did not get access to that information until, I think it was Tuesday. When I wrote them up and I go to meetings for NASTF, back then one was in Detroit, one in Vegas, first thing that came up to me, gee, you just could have called us. Like, you know, they would have given me the info. I said, that's not the point. The regular technicians, you know, why we do certain things like TST, we donate our time. It's to help technicians, okay? The business has been good to me. So you give back a little bit. Same thing with NASTF. It's an organization of people that donate their time. I don't get paid to go there, nor does Mark Warren and a bunch of other people. We go there, we sit. How many people have sat in an NASTF meeting? I know Pierre has, and probably a few people in here. So we sit there, we go over problems, and they got all pissy at me because I wrote them up. I said, it shouldn't be special favors because at that point, you know, you're someone, right? It should be, if any one of you want that information, you should be able to get it, especially after they take your 20 bucks, right? So now I go there and I get this information and I see three-way catalyst, P0420, 02H, 81H, like 02H, 81, hold it, I got 02, I don't have 81. And what the hay is H? I didn't know when I first looked at this. I had not a clue. The information does not match up. There is no component hex number 1. Okay? It's not on here. So now I can't go by that's a 420 yet, right? Here is everything on Mode 6. And by the way, how many guys have gone on the Nissan site to try to find? This is everything they had on Mode 6. Notice it tells you to go to their consult 2, blah, blah, blah. This is every little thing of Mode 6. Not every cars give you misfire. Not every cars give you EVAP. Not every car gives you EGR, right? Okay, so here, the only thing these guys gave you was the catalyst, EVAP, O2, and O2 heater. That's the only thing in Mode 6. Nothing else. The H is a hexadecimal thing. And the numbers up there, well, when we look at this closely, we have two different 01H, 01H, 02H, and 81H. If only the 81 was there, it would have matched up, right? But watch. When we go in the scan tool, I start flipping through screens, and if you're familiar with OTC, it works pretty good. You get a list real quick, you hit the button, and then it blows it up into these screens, okay? Now, the 0101, maximum limit was 100, 118. It failed, didn't it? ECU number 10, in most cases, the engine controller. 18, in many cases, is the tranny controller. That's when you see ECU ID. Now, this is the correct information. Why? There's my 01 and 01. 01, 01, that equals a 420. Back this up a little later on, there's the P0420 on the car. But this didn't come, this screen here wasn't there. Once they erased his code, it was off for a while. Why? The monitor wouldn't even run. I started looking at mode 6 info. And finally, when the monitor did get through and it passed, this thing came back. You look at freeze frame, like we said, 52 miles an hour. Engine load was 38%. These are the things to look at when you're doing that. Now, the fix for this car, and by the way, you know the first thing they told them? I printed out some of those screens. You know, you have the little Medtronics printer from your battery tester. I said, here, Alan, go down. You know what they told them? Your mechanic doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't have the, this is no BS. He doesn't have the dealer tool. Well, he says, oh, real? Oh, really? Go look at your inspection machine, and if you guys are not aware of this, my training software is on every inspection machine in New York State. This is one of the states, like Massachusetts and many other states, that I do training for. And I told them, I gave him a name to call someone up in Albany, and I said, also, you're going to call EPA, you're going to speak to Arvin Mitchum or Holly Puglisi. You know what they did to him? Gave him a rent-a-car. They changed the catalytic converter. They changed the O2 sensors on the car, front and rear. See the new pipe? Gave him everything. And they reprogrammed it. Many of these, by the way, keep in mind, many Nissans and Infinitis, all they need is to be reprogrammed. You know what they do? They stretch that baby out. We don't want to change any parts, right? But this one, they weren't taking any chances, and they gave him everything for free. They tried to stroke him along until he was over, oh, you're over 80,000, sorry, can't do it. But when you give him a little twist, the owner of the dealership called him up. So he got it all for free. Here's another one, a Nissan Quest, a P0420 and a P0325, knock sensor. Now, where are you going to look? I want you to do a little thinking. What does a knock sensor have to do with a 420? Could that affect anything? You bet, right? We could have some timing problems there. So we see fuel trim, nothing insane, but we got to take care of that. We look at mode 6 data. We got some problems going on, right? Okay. Look at this here. Now this, again, we're running this at about 1900, cleared out the DTCs, you got to run all this. 42% efficiency. First, we're doing good. Yellow is the front O2. Remember, you could do this on your Snap-on. You could do this on your OTC. You could do this on your Auto Ingenuity, your Ease, whoever. This happens to just be one screen that he has. You could do that on the little Code Reader 6 by launch. Okay? Simple. You take the front O2 or O2s if it was 2 banks. You look for it going up and down. Watch the back. Now here it looks good, doesn't it? Where does it start to fail? Right there. And that's what you're going to see many times. It starts to fail at a certain point. Okay? You need to look at it, but the fix for this was the knock sensor was a problem. And Nissans have problems with knock sensors, right? You got to make sure they work. You remember when Rich Peterson back there, John Anello called Rich. You know, when John Anello has a problem, and John couldn't make it today. He's selling his house and had to help move his sister out, or one of his properties, I should say. At any rate, John gets a problem, and sometimes he has to call Rich in, because Rich is good with electrical stuff. You remember one of the classes he did, the older Nissans, to get rid of some problems, just like the motor mount problem, what did you do? You cut the wire. When you cut the wire, it never had a problem. The new ones, that's an open circuit, isn't it? You ain't keeping the light off, you got to fix the problem. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with these. So knock sense is an issue. Honda, 2003 to 2005, non-reprogrammable computers, P0420. Oh, okay. There was a programming error, okay? You have to install a new PCM. So here's the thing I want you to be aware of. Let's say this guy comes in with his 2003 or 4 or 5, and you sell him a new catalytic converter. You think it's going to fix the problem? No, the parameters now are set where this thing is just going to keep throwing that 420 on, isn't it? Now you're going to look like the horse's butt, right? That's going to be the you suck light time when it comes on, and that customer comes back and they want their money back. They want the car fixed. And don't forget, when you look at these cars, you got the DTC, the Diagnostic Trouble Code. It's already a problem. Pending code, it's going to happen. Mode 6 is before the pending code. You should all be printing this stuff out and looking not only at a DTC, but what's pending. What's coming close to failing on mode 6, and give it to the customer. And by the way, people are not stupid. They understand, here's a max number, here's a min number, you're close to this or that, right? Your customers would understand that. The important thing is the front office guy needs to speak to these people and make them understand that. And females were the best. Most of my customers years back were females. And I loved females. You know why? Not because I'm a guy. If I was the other way, if I like males, well, that's a different story. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's from the Massachusetts guys, they tell me. Anyway. they love the rip. They're good guys. They're not gay. Now you, Paul, I don't know. Seinfeld's from New York. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Anyway, where was I? But, you know, be aware that when you spend some time up front with the customer, especially a female, they're really more out and understandable when you start telling them, look, this was wrong, and you print out. Alan Monk somewhere here. Where are you, Alan? Remember years back when we had Medtronics first come out with the battery tester? They came to have me test a prototype, and I told them one thing was wrong with the tool. I love that Medtronics tester, but it sucked. It was no good. You know why? It didn't print that first, right? And when Alan bought one of the first tools they came out with, you made money that first week, didn't you? Still makes money because he printed things out. You got to print it out, and a customer knows today, Mr. Mark, it's good. Next time they come in, it's good. Third time they come in, it's no good. They're going to have you fix the car. Why? You built up some confidence with this printout. Right? It's in black and white. When you go to the doctor, you get all this cockamamie paper stuff, right? They charge you, they bend you over, right? They give you ooh, ah, every other thing, and you get this big bill. I don't even know what half the stuff says, but it's on paper. It looks pretty good to me, right? And you don't mind paying for it. The days of you just going in there and going, okay, Mr. Jones or Mr. Smith, you owe me X amount of dollars and be on your way. You got to really be explaining to the customer. And by the way, that's how to keep a customer too. Why? Because you're showing them and educating them like Marcy Sims, right? An educated consumer is a good customer, right? That's your best customer. You got to educate. You got Sims in Massachusetts, don't you? No? No? Connecticut? Oh, they went bankrupt? No, we still have one in White Plains? No? Oh, they're out? Oh, okay. So I guess they weren't too educated, were they? Okay, let's move on. Here's another one by Bernie I threw in, another 420. You can see a pretty big failure here. And again, are they following? Toyota's really weird. You know, you have an SAE standard, and you've seen them all over. These are all different case studies. Some were 7 or some were 6. Their limit on this is 0.499. Who knows why they have these limits? And by the way, when you program, do you ever go look at mode 6 before? Did you ever do that? And see maybe if you programmed, did the minimum or maximum number change? Did they do something? They may have. So next time, how many of you guys are in here programming? Good, good. That's what I like to see. The rest of you need to do that. How many in here ever changed the prom or memcal? Almost the whole room. Okay. Now, that was the hard work. Now you need to do the easy work. And by the way, I'll give a plug. You see that Fronius over there? That $1,500 battery maintainer? You need a maintainer. Or you could, the Power Max we gave away. Who won that Power Max today? Rick. Oh, Rick. Like you need it. Okay. Power Max. It's a pretty damn good tool for the price. If you're going to buy any of them, we don't care what you get, take your lab scope out and watch the AC ripple. There's a lot of them out there. I won't mention the bad names, but there's some big name companies that you would be surprised how much noise they put out on that line. And you want to make sure through an amp clamp that it says it's 75 amp, that you're getting 75 amps, especially on some of these European cars like Pierre's favorite car, BMW. Okay, so be very, very careful on that. Okay, look at this fuel trim chart. Is this a mess or what? Look at this, and what do you think is going to be a problem? Where is our biggest problem? Could be a vacuum leak. Why? It looks like we're at low RPM going up, and then what happens? Well, clears up, but how about that? How about this? Well, you got a couple of bank problems there. You know, Bernie is very lenient when you make a tool. He's pretty generous with, before he throws it to red. I forgot what is it, 20? 20, you probably see this problem smacking you in the face, right? But you build a tool, that's what you got to do. Looking at this here, running the test, a little bit different results again. This was just after a cleaning that was done. Okay? Running a cleaning through sometimes will help clean up these problems. It's not always going to do it. Okay? And sometimes when we fix a problem, here's another thing. I was just doing a webcast, I guess last week. A couple of the guys that were online asked the question, how come I said to reset fuel trim? How many guys find that parameter in their scan tool under the actuator test? If you're not using it, fuel trim sometimes will hang there for a bit, right? Now, we're not talking about, what does everyone think? I'll clear the codes, that's going to reset fuel trim. That's keep alive memory. What do you need to do? If your scan tool doesn't do it, you need to disconnect, take the key out ignition, disconnect the battery cables, go to Radio Shack, buy what? That's right, 1 ohm, 10 watt resistor. 1 ohm, 10 watt resistor probably. And by the way, you know that little nincompoop kid that works in there trying to sell you 4 cell phones before you walk past the counter? Okay? Guess what? In the back, they still have, believe it or not, drawers. You go in the drawers, you got to look yourself because this kid has no idea there's connectors, there's all this stuff. If not, I found them in a Radio Shack near me. If not, you can just go online to Radio Shack and find them. 1 ohm, 10 watt resistor, solder some ends on it, take the both battery cables off, put them together, that way you don't have a problem. Touching them, here's one, Alan Boggs, he's one of our members down in New Orleans. Alan said, hey, gee, you know, I know you want a lot of resistance in there. How about if I use a set of jumper cables or something? It's better, right? It's more resistance per se. Or you have some sort of carbon pile or something that you can change resistance. Okay? It's better than doing this and bringing those capacitors down quick. Some car manufacturers don't like you doing that. And it's just better to have the right thing. When you do that, that's when all of that memory is erased. Also, another trick for you. You got hard to run monitors, okay? When you clear this stuff out, these hard to run monitors, when you do this reset by putting a 1 ohm 10 watt resistor, you go into a fast relearn mode on most of the vehicles. Meaning, when you go out, monitors will set a lot quicker than if you didn't do that. There's plenty of different problems where monitors won't run on cars. You come across some caravans, you can't get a monitor running, you make a code come on, and all of a sudden the computer wakes up, you're racing, all of a sudden monitors run quicker. Okay? There's just certain vehicles that are quirky, right? So you need to be aware of these things. Okay, a milliamp on a 420 here. Here's another one now. You got a couple of things going with the EVAP setup. Catalyst, now here's a different on this. This GM is doing the catalyst test OSC. Now remember we had minimum and maximum? Units being measured in seconds. Some of the car manufacturers, now GM, you've seen them do min-max. Here they're doing a little bit different in Mode 6. Their unit of measurement is now in seconds. So one of the things I want you to be aware of, not only that it failed, but what they're measuring it. It's not always the same thing. This you'll see, millivolts, whatever, kilopascals, liters, whatever they're going to do. Sometimes there's amps, right? Sometimes they'll give you some amperage reading on O2 heaters and stuff. Look at those things. You know, I know it's pretty tough working in a shop. Especially, how many of you guys still work in gas stations that you do repair? Oh, you poor bastards. That is the hardest, because been there, done that. It's way easier in a repair shop. You get all the nincompoops come in, every complaint, or they think you're Mr. Direction. You're Rand McNally, right? You know everything. I don't know where these streets are. Who the hell knows where they're at? But they're mad, and they're going to interrupt your lunch. Or, like one guy who used to come years back, Sal, said a guy followed him. He went in the bathroom to do you know what, and the guy's following him and asking him a question. That's how bad it is in this business, right? Okay. Is there a real lunch hour? Pretty tough. Maybe if you work in a dealership. Okay, some of the fuel trim numbers are pretty good here. 1,700 RPMs, look at this, it's a mess. So you all know now, you've seen a pattern here, correct? What do we want to do on our scan tool when you get back on Monday? You want to graph the front and rear oxygen sensor. Now, I want to remind some that not every car uses a front oxygen sensor, you use a air-fuel ratio. The air-fuel ratio sensor, is it going to go up and down like this? No. Very good.
Is there an easy way to tell just by looking at it whether it's an air sensor?
When someone put the wrong one in or it's bad? I'm sorry, say it again?
Is there an easy physical way to look at the sensor and tell if it's an air fuel sensor or an oxygen sensor?
Here's a question here. Is there an easy way to look at the air-fuel ratio sensor or oxygen sensor and tell which one it is? Sometimes it's pretty difficult. Match part numbers up, and here's a tidbit. Sometimes you're going to look at something steady on a generic scan tool. There's a major manufacturer out there that still doesn't really show you air fuel on a generic. You'll see a steady voltage of about 680 something millivolts, pretty much not moving. You know then it's not. Now, if you got enhanced data like Toyota or Honda, whatever, go and look for something that's about 3 point something volts, not switching. Yeah, that's probably the best thing to do. Hang on, I'm deaf. Bald, big nose, deaf, fat, everything. Everything going on these days. What? That's good. Look at the placard under the hood to see what's what. And by the way, here on the East Coast, we are California emissions, aren't we now? For years, actually. So when you look, whether they call them East Coast emissions or California, it depends what sticker they feel like putting on it, looks like. But you're going to see right under the hood, most of the cars you're getting, especially if they're Toyota, they're Honda, they're Subaru, okay, Volkswagen, you're going to start to see a lot of air-fuel ratio sensors, aren't you? And soon as the domestics want to get more and more mileage and keep that fuel tight, you ever see how they lean these cars out? Remember, I used to say NOx happens at about 17-to-1 air-fuel ratio? Hell, they're doing 20 and plus to 1. They're super lean, right? Because what are they doing? They're squeezing everything out and they're changing fuel ratio like this. They're moving quick. It's not the old days. Do we have another question? I'm sorry. Okay. Then I stop my babble and move on. Now, here's an important thing. 1,700 RPMs. Here's why, and again, Bernie recommends doing this, right? He has this in his tool. But look how this car failed. Or passes. Fails here, could pass there. Okay? Needed a cat. You got to be careful. Here's what I noticed. I don't only do it what Bernie says here. Okay? 17, 1800 RPMs. Try it at idle, see what happens. Try it at different, you'll see another one with even higher RPMs. Take it for a ride is really good, because that's the real deal. Racing it up in your bay, just like people that do volumetric efficiency in their bay, you kind of get away with it a little bit, but the real deal is either throw it on a dyne or take it down the road. Hit the record button or let someone else drive with you, because that telephone pole will be in your lap before you know it. Okay, here's the Civic. Got battery problem here, check engine light, 2 monitors not complete. A P0131 O2 sensor circuit low voltage. When you see circuit low, this is important in everything you work on a car. Circuit low means what? Circuit low means shorted. Okay? Circuit high, open, very good. Keep that in your mind when you're working on these cars. Those are some of the first places to look. Here's the O2 sensor on a scope. Doesn't look like it's doing much here, is it? Okay. Here's a new O2 signal. Okay. Going up and down pretty good. Moving up and down. We're getting up to 9.5. We're going down to about 100 millivolts. Race it up. When you're testing an O2 sensor, race that vehicle up at 2500. You should have some propane, right? You could add propane, or you can make a big vacuum leak. You should see something change. You make that vacuum leak, what's going to happen? It should go drop a little bit, then all of a sudden it'll go rich for a bit, right? Because what's the computer doing? Compensating, then it'll get back in its rhythm. So you could play that game going rich and lean. You could play the warm-up thing here. You can see if the heater's working, see now what your scan tool's looking like. RPM makes a difference. Vacuum, 16 inches of vacuum, 2 DTCs. Okay, this is another mess here. The O2 sensor and a new cat stopped this car from coming back. Sometimes you got to replace it, but you got to check it, right? Now, some of you guys do mobile diagnostics. I know we have Adam Varney somewhere. He does Connecticut and New York, and Ed Hazard, he does Upper New York. We got Dave DeCourcy here, does Massachusetts. And do we have any other mobile guys in here? Oh, you. He's in Wichtown up in Massachusetts, right? And anyone else does mobile? Okay. Well, these mobile guys really get to see a lot of stuff out there. And I bet most of the shops you go in, when they got a 420, they already threw all the parts before they called your butt in, didn't they? Okay. Now it's your job to find out what.
Haven't seen a bad cat yet.
Dave made a good comment. He hasn't seen a bad cat yet.
It's all been changed.
Because they've all been changed. Now hopefully, let me ask you guys, when you see 420s and a cat's been changed, how many of these are aftermarket cats? Most of them. What are you finding as the most problematic cars to diagnose? I gave you my opinion before, but what's your problem was? Subaru, okay. Toyota. BMW. Well, then you're going for big bucks. You just call Pierre up on that. Okay. Volkswagen has quite a bit. Now, again, aftermarket cats, you're going to run into more problems. They're really, just barely made. Now, that doesn't mean your blue and red guy or your yellow and blue guy or any other parts store doesn't sell a good cat. They do. But what do parts stores want to do? They want to make money and sell you products quick, right? A lot of times, you go and you see online, because most of you guys are doing stuff online, right? Craig, runs a shop. So I go look sometimes. They're playing on the website to look at a particular part company. Well, if you do a Whirlpack thing, Whirlpack usually sells most OE or OS, right? And sometimes even then, things don't come boxed as they're said, correct? I mean, everyone makes mistakes. But you don't want to look bad and put something new on a car and it don't work. If you got a good track record with the blue guys or the red guys or the purple guys, and that works on that Toyota, Okay, that's working for you now, right? And if you know a lot of those are coming back, why in the world are you doing the same damn thing? Makes no sense. Okay, this is a good one. This is Dave, Bernie's buddy. You guys have met Dave out there in Kansas City, his limp. Dave is a great guy. I forgot Dave's last name, but Dave now just opened the BMW shop. I was out there in New Mexico. Place is enormous. I think he has 16 or 18 lifts in here. It's like a dealership. It was an old Datsun dealership. And by the way, tidbit of information, the Datsun brand is coming back in not the U.S. yet, but in developing countries, as they put it. And they may start to bring back some of the, you know, Datsun maybe 280s or something as special build cars. So the B0210 was a good little car, wasn't it? Okay. At any rate, here he has a problem on this Volvo. And you know Volvo never plays things the right way, right? Pretty tough on information. Here the monitors will not complete monitors. He gets a DTC in the beginning as a P0133 O2 slow. Now, he runs a good shop. One of his guys, and he got some real good techs there, he decides, since he had the code, he's throwing in new O2 sensors. This is what he's doing. Pops them in. He has, you see the 133. Okay, still got monitors not complete. You look at engine temp, fuel trim, all of the information here. Nothing sticks out to smack you in the face. Okay, there's some lab scope readings of the O2s working. Punching it, the oxygen sensor goes down, comes up good. Everything's hunky-dory here. Okay, now he looks something up here, and one of the problems on this car, because he couldn't get rid of the code, he reprograms it with an update software. Soon as he updated the software, and by the way, this also happens on Hondas, he never had a P0420, and this is going to be a real tough one to sell the customer, isn't it? You come in with one code, I reprogrammed it, oh God, you need, and especially on a Volvo, you now need a catalytic converter. Now they have a few years where Volvos are really finicky. And you should be aware, even on some of those Hondas, that if you have one code that looks like it's an oxygen problem, and there's a software update, you can almost guarantee you're going to wind up with a P0420. Now that's kind of scary. What could we use? You remember some of the tools before? Hey, how about checking with a gas analyzer, see roughly where our cat's at, right? Because what's OBD2 doing now, or their computer doing? They had blinders on for a while, right? Then they must have got caught by those EPA guys and told to put a new program in there. But you know, once you tell that customer, here's what the problem is, you need 2 new O2 sensors, and you need a reprogramming, and you do it, you're married to that car. And that's one tough divorce. Could be almost as bad as mine. Took years. Okay, so here, after it was done, P0420 came up. That's pretty scary. Cat was shot, new cat, not the O2 sensors. Okay, and Dave is a big Whirlpack guy. Actually, Whirlpack sends him everywhere because he buys so many parts besides from his Volvo dealer. So Dave does a great job. Thanks for that case study from him. Okay, here's a Honda with a 420. P0420 on it. Nothing crazy. The load is a little high, but we are at a RPM of 1,500. We got a 48% load. This is the last mode 6. Now you see here, you notice that this is not highlighted, is it? So when you don't highlight read mode 6 all the time, this is the last mode 6 data. This is where you can get screwed while you put this in here on your regular scan tool. Remember, only 3 brands, update. OTC, what was the other one? Ease and Bernie tool, or ATS, whatever he calls it, E-scan. Okay? So the last test run, if you looked at this, oh, it looks good. You need to click the button. Okay? Okay. You look at fuel trims, all hunky-dory. 720 RPMs. That catalyst looks pretty damn good, doesn't it? Are we pretty steady in the rear O2? Remember, the red is the rear O2. The front going up and down like there's no tomorrow.
Gee, I got a quick question.
Okay.
For that rear O2 sensor, it doesn't matter?
If it's high or low,
Yeah, as long as it's steady?
some car lines like them low or more towards the middle. Some will be up high. Because when you look at it, when it's high, oxygen content, the stuff we breathe, is going to be low, right? That's a rich condition. When it's low, it's high, but some of them will test it at a time when oxygen content coming out of the tailpipe is high. So as long as it's steady is the thing to remember. So look here, no changes other than here's idle, here's 3400. What happens at 3400? So you could be faked out, couldn't you? Here's it at 2000. So it fails again. This one needed a cat. Now over here, you see when this sometimes goes up? Now we're high, we're switching, right? What just happened? It made the transition to go down. It's not switching, is it? And by the way, am I going like this? Brum, brum, brum. No. Okay. I'm at 2,500 RPMs. I'm not pegging this. What happens sometimes, if you look at enough of the rear O2s, some manufacturers will stay high at first, and then you're going to see they stay low, and the front is still switching. It's okay. Long as the rear doesn't follow it. There's no one home. I guess with those extenders, what do the extenders really do? They keep the signal so far away, it's going to look steady, isn't it? By the way, you won't be able to do that on all the new cars because they're playing with all different tests how they're going to go back and check those algorithms. It's different. It's a different ball game nowadays. Okay, here's a Lincoln 420. Two banks bad now. Look at these two banks. You can see here green's the front, blue's the rear. Pretty bad, right? Now, you know it's a Ford product, right? Do we put a cat in this car? Or do we research a little bit? What's bad on Fords all the time? Mass airflow sensors. Look, one of the things I like to go out just real quick, here's what I do. When I look at the Bernie tool, I like it because if I see high numbers here, we said, is a vacuum leak, right? If I got a lot of red up top, fuel delivery problem. Could be a clogged fuel filter, bad fuel pump, right? Sometimes it only happens on the load. Voltage drop, right? When it starts to happen a lot in the middle, on both banks, if you have two banks, and it starts getting worse as you're going through, then kind of clears a little bit and goes back, you're going to have a mass airflow sensor problem. By the way, how many guys have used the Ford IDS, and I don't know if I have it in this one, I know I have it in one of my other classes. How many of you have actually looked at the Ford IDS where it tells you to test the mass airflow sensor and shows you what fuel trim is going to be like on the sensor? Have anyone used that on that? You need to look at it. There's a lot of good things on the IDS. You need to go down the software and play with it. And how many Ford IDS users do we have in here? And you all are aware, by the way, Ford is coming out with a brand new tool that is not going to use the Teradyne box anymore. Okay? I was just out in Kansas City with Joey Scans. You know, he's Mr. Tool Man. Okay? So Joey knows everything when it comes to scan tools. OE stuff. Does a good job. And I was in his bomb shelter. We went underground. I forgot how much concrete he poured. And Anello came out there too, and he was bouncing around. I go, dude, you're underground, man. We're ready for a nuclear attack. Actually, the reason why Joey built this little bomb shelter thing is not for a bomb. You know what happens out in Kansas. You know, Dorothy, Wizard of Oz. We got it. Okay, volumetric efficiency. And by the way, this is exactly what the Ford IDS is doing. It's telling you to test volumetric efficiency. What do we see here? The red is where it's supposed to be. The yellow is actual. Do you need the Bernie tool to do this? I need the Bernie tool if I want to make money. You know why? I'm going to print this out for a customer in color. I'm going to make this thing look good. I'm going to show them before and after, right? I always use the game, if it looks like this, if it was good, starts to look like that, we got an issue. You get one finger, then you really got problems, right? Okay. So guess what? You can do this without Bernie's tool, could you? What did I say earlier you should do if you don't have Bernie's tool for volumetric efficiency? What can we replace it? Charlie Gilberti's a genius. Calculated load. And what was the number? 90% or better. Very good. Okay. Same thing, drive it down the road. The fix was cleaning the mass airflow sensor. Now, if you're going to use Q-tips, okay, you got to be careful because any of the fuzzies that stay on this baby are going to be an issue. A lot of the new ones, have you seen the new style? This is more of an old style mass air. Have you seen the new Fords where it's like flat and has a little cut, you barely can see the wire? That's to keep a lot of the debris out, especially cheap air filters. You guys like buying the cheap junk. Well, not you guys, you're the cream of the crop. But you know, a lot of the places, right? The wagon peddler comes by or your parts store got a deal. Going to make you an offer you can't refuse, right? You buy that cheap air filter, you throw that puppy in there, and what happens? The little fibers come off and get on that mass airflow sensor. I also have some good ones. K&N is a great air filter, isn't it? Don't say, Here's the problem.
Don't clean them. Don't throw it away.
Over oil, because I've used K&N for years. The thing is, you got to wash it out good. You got to dry it, and you got to oil it and make the oil soak in and dry. But in America, we think more is always better. A little oil, I'll put more. It's like the dry gas, right? One bottle, I'll throw 4 bottles in. It's a little better for it. It's not. So that is an issue. I also see that when someone doesn't put the right air filter in or the air box is not totally closed, I have great pictures of leaves being stuck in there, okay? Or debris, plastic bags that people pick up or whatever. You need to look at stuff. And again, shame on you if you send a car out and it goes to another shop, you didn't diagnose this right, you bang the guy for a cat, okay? He comes back and comes in with a plastic bag. And he goes, I want my money back. And he's showing you this plastic bag. You should have seen that. You should have been looking at the basic items. Basic stuff help fix cars, right? So you should be doing some of these things. Now look at it after it was cleaned. By the way, do not use brake clean. Do not use carburetor cleaner. Oh, it'll work for a little bit. You can use the CRC or Windex works real good. If you're going to use a blowgun, Danny, you still got those great blowguns? Oh, well, you can see Danny, or you can always contact him or wherever. You carefully blow this thing, clean it off with some Windex, or the CRC stuff is great. Mass airflow cleaner, right? Clean it off, make sure it's clean, make sure you got a good filter, and check it out. Okay. Here was a Celica with a 420. Freeze frame show that the failure happened at 61 miles an hour. Now, you've all heard of the federal test procedure, right? The old federal test procedure. How many of you guys, especially here in New York, did a dyno test? The dyno went up to somewhere just about 61 or so, right? From 57 on a high hill to about 61, 62. So you could run into a problem. We got a 420. We don't see anything too crazy. Calculated load, but we're at 28 RPM. 2800 is pretty good. We start looking down at fuel trim and stuff. We look here and we don't have a failure, but again, we're not looking. What should we do? We should be read all mode 6 continuously. So we have 0.253 is the test. The limit is 0.300. Close, right? Close, but shouldn't we be looking at this a little more updated results rather than in the last one, right? So does it fail or pass? That's pretty damn close, isn't it? Here at idle, 81, oh, I have another one, thank you. 81% at idle. But what do you notice in the back on that graph? What do you notice? Does it look like it wants to jump a little bit? A little red bouncing around? 2,900. Not 1,800 that Bernie says. Because when did it fail? And where did I say my RPMs were? Let's look at that. Let's go back. 2,840. See where freeze frame can help you? So you know it's all a 15% factor ratio, right? Could be 15% higher, could be 15% lower. So you go a little higher, you go a little lower with it, right? Let's get back where we were there. So we see it fails, okay? Mode 6, totally different readings now. 0.398 as a max limit, 0.086.
That's usually just, when you first clear it, it runs like a rough filter,
Then it goes buff. Right. So what Dave is saying, sometimes what happens, when you first clear it out, it will change from a rough type reading to a better one. What Craig says, and also you find in Identifix, how many of you guys have pulled a spark plug wire? Have you done that old Saab? That was a Saab SAE paper? Okay. Now sometimes, yeah, do it on Toyota as well. Yeah, it'll work many times to clean that cat out. Okay. It'll do so it. Craig says for people on the internet, because can't hear him from that far away, he's saying what he does in his shop, he does a cleaning, okay, and with the cleaning, you also reset and look at the mode 6. If it don't work, again, remember I told you before, you should be looking at this mode 6 data. And you can show a customer, here's why I did it. It had an effect. What do you want to do? It looks like you're going in the right direction. Do you want me to do another one? Now, you just did a run right the other day, right, Alex? Was that the Chevy van? Oh, the Camry. Yeah, you did the Camry. That's right, the Camry. I forgot about the Camry.
Camera for the 420 and the van for the fuel injection.
Okay. On the 420 car you had that failed and you ran it, what else happened after that? Hurts my ear.
Two cleaners on it.
Oh.
And fixed the cab looked better. Took pictures of it before and after.
Okay, and you'll probably see this article coming up. Alex he had a P0420 on a Toyota. He did 2 run-right cleanings on it just the other day, okay? And it came up looking good. So now, you know, maybe the light will come back on, but if you see improvement, you're on the right track, right? And is the customer happy? I mean, they don't like to spend money. Now, you may get a guy, here's the deal. We can't talk about what you charge or don't charge, but here's what I would do, okay? What I would do is say, look, here's what I get for cleaning, whatever number you pick, okay? It should be enough that if the guy complains, hey, you charged me for 3 cleanings, you know, you should have enough bumper room that when he goes for the repair and the converter to go, all right, I'll split the price with you, or maybe give him 2 of them back, because he did want the first one, right? You got to play a game with them, right? Because people want bargains, and especially in this tight economy, they're going to go, why did you do that? Do you want aggravation to argue with the customer? Because we all know you could be dead right, especially in New York State. I can tell you with DMV rules, forget it. I mean, you'll be giving the guy everything back. You'll be working for free. You'll be paying him. Seriously, no lie.
If it doesn't, I'll give you a refund on 2 and replace the cat.
Good. So Mike has the thing here in case you couldn't hear him. He tells the customer if he sees improvement, he does 3 cleanings. If it works, they pay for all 3. If not, you're paying for 1, it'll refund them for 2. Again, depending on how you charge for it. Years back, I used to get some big money. Okay, so the run right cleaning again. Boy, Bruce, I better get a drink after this. Now, this has had nothing to do, by the way, Will, nothing to do with being here. I like BG. I got a lot of rings. Okay, here's a different mode 6. What does this look like? This is the Toyota factory scan tool. Now, they make this a little more visual. What do I mean by that? You got a box here. Red, it's bad. Green, it's good. They use this little thing, as Ford likes to call it. What do they call that little thing? The tick. I'm looking for ticks, like my cat's got ticks or something. Tick. What the hell's a tick? It must be like the bonnet or something, you know? Some guy, when he made the software, tick, I don't know, I didn't know that. It must be stupid. But at any rate, you could see here we get a test value, okay, and a limit. And also, if you have this tool, have you guys played with this? It's a real good tool. I mean, I wish they made their relative compression better and a couple other things, but it's a damn good tool and works quite well. If you don't have it, again, you win that Mongoose cable. This is the Toyota Techstream. You go on the Toyota website for 55 bucks, and I just did this when I went to do a class. I didn't have a full license. I downloaded it. I went up to Boston, Massachusetts to do this class for this guy, and man, you get the latest software, your Mongoose cable. I went with my Mongoose cable. I got full things. I could reprogram the car. I can do everything. Got all the factory manuals. You can't go wrong. Now, if you buy the whole year, what is it, $900 for the year?
Just went up. Yeah, it's like a grand.
Oh, it's $1,000 now. They told me it just went up. But it's not bad. If you don't do a lot of Toyotas, by the way, this is no lie. Common Scan, some of you guys lucky when you bought them. And as I ask, how many guys have the Common Scan? That thing kicks ass, right? You got Autoland Scientech, kicks butt on those cars. Launch sometimes is super good, and sometimes not the greatest, right? But that's when you got to complain to them so they can figure it out. So certain scan tools, you don't need always to pull out a factory tool because some of the aftermarket ones do a great job. Okay, Snap-on, the latest version. Got to tell you, I'm amazed. Very, very good job. 11.4. No, the Mongoose cable, good question. I don't know if we have one up here. Yeah. With this cable, it's a USB cable. You don't need the J25. This is a J2534. This just goes straight into a laptop. And by the way, you got to go to the Drew site. This cable not only does Toyota, I think it does VW. Right? I think, you know, you got to look at it. I haven't used it for that, but I believe it does. The Mongoose cable is just your connector. Plugs into your computer. It's your interface. You have the software you download. You pay 55 bucks. You get it for 3 days. They don't allow 1 day. You plug it into the car. You're free. You know, you paid your 55 bucks. Everything. Now, after 3 days, but how many times are you going to use it? So it works real well. Let's move on. Here's a Honda we had in. Now, by the way, look at this boot. These are people that don't do maintenance on a car, do they? What did we say? To find misfires easy we could do with this? Wrap it with what? Aluminum foil. Yes, now we're home. So we got some exhaust gas readings here. You got 327 parts per million hydrocarbons. You don't see anything on new cars, do you? So you know this baby has an issue. CO2, 13%, but oxygen. The 19 to 21% oxygen we breathe in the air, coming out of this car is 1.6%. What's that tell us? Got a misfire. Your oxygen content should be so low, it should be 0.3 or so. But if you don't use a gas analyzer, you don't go by these readings. Today's CO2, you've all heard of all the green people, right? CO2 is now evil, right? Where's Dr. Evil, right? Guess what? It used to be good. Now they're coming up with a catalyst for CO2. I guess it's just like that Freon problem. You know, the caps were gone for a while. Then when the space shuttle went up not that long ago, the polar caps were okay. And now 134 is evil. You know that. The first Cadillac is coming out with 1234YF. Okay. It is coming out.
Hey, G, I hate to say it, but we got a real serious problem with our federal government. Everybody better have a heads up.
I can't get political, but I'd say go vote.
Serious trouble.
Vote. Express your opinion. Look at Lambda. Lambda is good. What do you know about Lambda? Who wants to give me a quick course on Lambda?
One is good.
One is good.
Well, actually, you want to be real anal. A little less than 1, 0.9967, right?
96 to 104.
Now, how about if it's over 1, Lambda over 1? Is that rich or lean condition? Lean. It's the opposite, right? So Lambda's good. Most gas analyzers now, they got Lambda built in. This happens to be the Bernie software. But remember I told you that EMS stuff? It's a real nice gas analyzer. You're going to see a lot of that stuff down the road. Did they win one of those awards, Craig? The EMS people? Okay, we gave them a Technician Choice Award because you know what I like? You got a back pressure thing right there. You just go, you could hook in with back pressure. I can get readings front and rear at the same time. Okay, look at this. Converter at low RPMs. 743. We got a 46% failure rate. 32% efficiency at 2100. 694, we're at 84%. So what I'm trying to show you here is, guess what? You need to change at different RPMs. You need to look at mode 6. Now look at this crazy value. They look at a minimum of 2300. What happened to 0 and 1? They don't tell you what they're measuring. Wasn't S for seconds, was it? Nope. Something else undefined, we don't know, but we know we have a failure. And again, auto ingenuity, and Bernie, at least color it for you to wake you up. Look inside of this cat. I don't think I have the video in there. Oh no. Now, this, no lie, this is inside of that substrate. Look at it. Okay, loose, clogged up. One side, it looked beautiful. Look at the other side, it was all cracked up. So when you look at these things, you got to look at both sides of the cat. Now, don't get the real BFH out, the big freaking hammer, right? If it wasn't broke by the time you're done banging, it is broke now, right? We're talking a rubber mallet. Carefully bounce it around. Now, here's the character that came in. I took these pictures and I go, this guy would be right out on his you-know-what in my shop. It'd be like, you're gone. This is the original cat. This is the one the guy wants to put in. By the way, the shield is covering somewhere here, and somewhere over here is really what the cat is. You know this customer is going to come back with a problem, isn't he?
Is the button in the middle of that? Did he bring in the cat?
He brought in the cat. You know what I would have done with him? See you later. Because you know what these people want to do? They want to come back and annoy you. It's like the nagging ex-wife or ex-husband. Okay. Okay, we're almost done. Something you need to know. EPA regulations. Every time you buy a catalytic converter, are you getting the paperwork? How many guys are getting the paperwork and doing this? This is a federal rule. This is not something that's BS. White goes to the customer. Yellow must be retained by the shop for 6 months. Pink, shop must attach it to the catalytic converter for 15 days. Oh, Bob, the junk man's coming by and he's going to give you $150 today. If you sell it, sorry, Mike, if you sell it and someone for EPA comes by, or your DEC or DMV, you are screwed. This is a federal law. Now, sometimes people think this is a bunch of bull, just like some of the guys that get nailed with air condition. You know, they're venting stuff, they're doing things wrong. You need to be the unlucky guy. There must be Rupert when you got caught with the batteries on the floor. Where's my buddy Rupert? Right, Rupert? You got nailed, never put a battery on the floor. Better put it on a piece of wood. But if it's on a rack and it has a hole in it, that's okay. But don't put it on the floor.
Why is that?
Who knows?
Because when batteries were made out of wood, then they would actually break down to the floor. I'm dead serious.
So it's okay to leak. It's okay to leak, I guess. Kevin. Okay, Kevin says, and I want to ask you, we're almost done. Kevin says he buys a cat from a dealer, he gets no paperwork. You better ask the dealer. By the way, MSDS is Material Safety Data Sheets, especially you shop owners. Do you have the stuff on there? By the way, CarQuest or Napa or anyone, they will give you for brake clean, whatever. You can download all the stuff now. Someone comes in your shop, and when I ran multiple shops, I was the unlucky guy that got nailed. Okay? Then I started working, teaching for Safety Clean years back on MSDS. I got a $10,000 fine for doing antifreeze flushes. But I did beat them in court, but it only cost me about $8,000 to be right. And that's no lie. Service station dealers helped me out. Oh. But they did help me. I won. Okay? But it's sad that there's certain rules that really don't make sense. But now you're aware of a lot of rules, right? Putting your waste oil in a proper container and so on and so forth. So this is another rule. And Norman said something. I'm sorry, Norman. Dealership is charging a core charge on a catalytic converter. How many people are doing that? Wow. Yeah, huh? Craig, are you paying a core charge? Holy God. I didn't know that. Yes, they got to be tagged. He asked a good question. Even though he bought it from the dealer and they want it back, you tell them you want the paperwork, you still got to hold on to this because you're responsible. You know, like those rules, cradle to grave stuff? This is the same type of game here. It's your responsibility, taking it out, holding it, then giving it to the dealer if they want it back. Okay. Okay, let's move on a little bit. I want to get you out of here. Want to thank you, and TST thanks you for coming out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thank you. Now it's raffle time.